My name is Jake, and I'm 32 years old. Up until recently, I thought I had a pretty solid, if not perfect, relationship with my parents. Sure, I always knew they favored my younger brother, Ethan, but I never thought they would take it as far as they did. Ethan has always been the golden child. Growing up, it was obvious. He got away with things I never could, received praise for the bare minimum, and when he messed up, my parents had a million excuses ready for him. He's just young, he's figuring things out. You need to be patient with him, Jake. Meanwhile, I was expected to be the responsible one, the mature one, the one who had to lead by example. And I did. I worked hard in school, got a decent job, and made something of myself. Ethan? Not so much. At 28, he still bounces between jobs, constantly figuring things out. He's lived with my parents rent-free his entire life, yet somehow, they act like he has it so much harder than I ever did. Anytime I tried to point out the double standard, I was met with the same response. Jake, you're independent. You don't need us the way Ethan does. That was their justification for every single thing. If I got a cheap birthday gift while Ethan got the latest gaming console? Well, Jake, you have a good salary now. You can buy it yourself. If I had to help out around the house while Ethan lounged on the couch? He's just not as responsible as you. If Ethan wrecked their car and they paid to fix it, but I had to buy my own first car with my own money? You can handle it, Jake. And for years, I swallowed it. I let it go. I told myself it wasn't worth fighting over. Then, I found out about the will. I had been helping my parents financially for years, covering part of their mortgage, paying for home repairs, even chipping in for their medical bills. I never did it expecting anything in return. They were my parents, and I wanted to make sure they were taken care of. But one day, completely by accident, I learned that they had left everything to Ethan. The house, the savings, their belongings, everything. It happened when I was visiting to help them sort out some paperwork. My mom had left a folder on the kitchen table while she stepped away to take a call, and I glanced at it absent-mindedly. That's when I saw my name, or rather, the absence of it. Ethan was listed as the sole inheritor. When my mom came back, I asked about it. I wasn't angry, not yet. I just wanted to understand. But instead of looking guilty or regretful, she acted like it was nothing. Oh, that, she said, waving a hand dismissively. We just figured it made the most sense. You have a good job, a stable life. Ethan, well, he's not as lucky. He's going to need the help more than you. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So because I worked hard and built a stable life, I get nothing? Even after everything I've done for you? She frowned at me like I was being unreasonable. You don't need it, Jake. It's just money. You'll be fine. Something in me snapped. For years, I had been their safety net. I had given and given, and the moment I stopped to ask if I mattered at all, I was dismissed like a greedy child throwing a tantrum. I realized, then and there, that in their eyes, I was nothing more than a resource. Someone to rely on when they needed help, but never someone they truly valued. So I made a decision. I stopped paying their bills. I stopped covering their mortgage. I stopped sending them money for groceries or repairs or unexpected expenses. If I didn't matter enough to be included in their will, then surely they didn't need my financial support either. It didn't take long for reality to hit them. At first, they didn't say anything. Maybe they thought I was just busy or that I had forgotten. But then, about a month later, I got a text from my mom. No greeting, no small talk. Just, the rent is due. That was it. No, how are you? No, hope you're doing well. Just a demand, like I was their personal ATM. I stared at the message for a long time, feeling a mix of emotions, anger, hurt, disappointment. Then, finally, I replied. I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I didn't beg them to see how unfair they had been. I simply responded with, I'm sure Ethan will handle it. That was all I said. No explanation, no argument, just a simple statement. And then I put my phone down and went about my day. It didn't take long for the backlash to begin. Less than an hour later, my phone buzzed again, this time, a call from my mom. I ignored it. Then another, and another. Finally, a text. Jake, answer the phone. This isn't funny. I let it sit. I wasn't in the mood to entertain whatever guilt trip they were about to throw at me. But sure enough, when I finally checked my voicemail later, I got exactly what I expected. Mom's voice was dripping with disappointment. Jake, I don't know what's gotten into you, but this is really selfish. Your father and I have always done our best for you. Is this really the kind of son you want to be? Ignoring us when we need you? Ethan can't afford to help right now. He's struggling. We thought you'd understand that. Call me back. I didn't. A few hours passed before I got the next message, this time from my dad. He rarely texted me, so I knew my mom must have gotten him involved. Jake, we need to talk. This is serious. Call your mother. Still, I ignored it. And for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't before: control. I had spent so long playing the role of the dutiful son, the responsible one, the one who never asked for anything. But the moment I refused to be used, they lost their minds. Then, as I expected, Ethan got involved. Dude, what is wrong with you? Mom and Dad are freaking out. Just pay the rent like you always do. Why are you being so difficult? I almost laughed at that. Like I always do? As if it was my job to keep a roof over their heads. As if the fact that he was their favorite meant that responsibility automatically shifted to me. I finally responded, but I kept it short. Not my problem. The response came within seconds. WTF does that mean? You can literally afford it. Stop being a dick. I set my phone down without replying. It was incredible how quickly the entitlement came out. No, hey, are you okay? No, I didn't realize how much you've been helping. Just immediate anger that I wasn't keeping the ship afloat for them. I expected more texts, maybe a few angry voicemails. But what I didn't expect was what happened next. The next day, I woke up to a message from my aunt, my mom's sister. Hey sweetie, your mom just called me in tears. She says you're refusing to help them and that they're at risk of losing the house? What's going on? I thought you guys were close. I sighed. Of course. The flying monkeys had arrived. I took a deep breath before responding. Hey Aunt Lisa, I appreciate you checking in. I'd love to explain, but I think you should ask Mom why she left me out of the will completely while expecting me to pay their bills. Let me know what she says. There was a long pause before she finally replied. Wait, what? I smirked. That was my cue to step back and watch the fallout begin. Because now, it wasn't just between me and my parents. Now, the rest of the family was about to find out exactly what had been happening behind closed doors. And I had a feeling my parents weren't going to like it. Aunt Lisa didn't text back right away, and I figured she was either trying to get the full story from my mom or just processing what I'd said. Either way, I wasn't going to chase after her for a response. Instead, I went about my day, enjoying the rare peace that came with not being at my parents' beck and call. But that peace didn't last long. By the afternoon, my phone lit up again. This time, it was my mom. How could you say that to Lisa? This is a family matter, not her business. You're making us look bad. Ah, there it was. Not we're sorry. Let's talk about this. Not I didn't realize how unfair this was to you. Just pure outrage that their actions were now being questioned by someone else. I waited a few minutes before responding. It became her business the moment you dragged her into it. If you don't want people knowing what you did, maybe you shouldn't have done it. That shut her up, at least for the moment. But then Ethan chimed in again. Mom is literally crying right now. Do you feel good about that? Do you feel good about making your own mother cry? I stared at the text, shaking my head. The manipulation was so blatant it was almost funny. Almost. If she's crying, it's because she's realizing that actions have consequences. Not my problem. I sent it, and this time, Ethan didn't respond right away. Maybe he was running back to Mom and Dad, feeding them my words so they could all sit together and fume about how awful I was. Meanwhile, I was starting to realize just how much weight had been lifted off my shoulders. For years, I had been the responsible one, the dependable one, the one who picked up the slack when my parents coddled Ethan and let him skate through life without consequences. And what did I get for it? Nothing. Not even an acknowledgement in their will. I'd sacrificed vacations, nights out, even put off buying a home of my own because I was always helping them out. And they never once appreciated it. I was done. A few hours passed, and then my phone rang again. This time, I answered, because it was Aunt Lisa. Hey, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Hey, Jake, she said, and I could tell from her tone that she was treading carefully. I just got off the phone with your mom. I waited, letting her continue. She told me a very different version of what's going on. I almost laughed. Let me guess, she made it sound like I'm some selfish, greedy son who suddenly decided to abandon them for no reason. There was a pause, and then a quiet sigh. More or less. I leaned back in my chair. Did she mention that I've been covering their bills for years? Or that they left me out of the will entirely while giving Ethan everything? Another pause. No. She left that part out. Of course she did. Well, I said, keeping my tone even, that's what happened. Lisa sighed again. Jake. I had no idea. I really didn't. And honestly, I don't blame you one bit. That surprised me. Really? Of course. Look, I love your mom, she's my sister, but she's always played favorites with Ethan. And I hate to say it, but I think she just assumed you'd always be there to clean up their messes. That you would never say no. Well, I said, she assumed wrong. Lisa was quiet for a moment. Then she said, so what now? I exhaled slowly. Now? Now they figure it out on their own. I'm done being their safety net. Lisa didn't argue. In fact, she let out a dry little chuckle. Honestly? Good for you. We talked for a few more minutes, and before we hung up, Lisa said something that stuck with me. I have a feeling this isn't over. They're going to try something. Be careful, Jake. She wasn't wrong. Because later that evening, I got another text from Ethan. Fine. If you want to act like a selfish A, go ahead. Just don't come crawling back when you realize you messed up. I stared at the message for a second before shaking my head. Messed up? I hadn't messed up a single thing. If anything, this was the first time in years that I was finally getting something right. But Ethan's text made one thing very clear. They weren't going to back down that easily. And part of me was almost looking forward to whatever they tried next. The next morning, I woke up to a pounding on my front door. Not a polite knock. Not even an impatient one. This was the kind of pounding that made you think someone was about to break the door down. I already knew who it was before I even checked the peephole. For a second, I debated just ignoring it, letting them stand out there and fume. But something told me that if I didn't answer, they'd just keep banging until the neighbors complained. With a sigh, I opened the door. Sure enough, there stood my parents and Ethan. Mom had her arms crossed, her face pinched with disapproval. Dad, as usual, stood slightly behind her, like he always did when she was in full attack mode. And Ethan, well, Ethan had the same smug, self-satisfied expression he always wore when he thought he was in control of a situation. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Wow, this is unexpected. Mom didn't waste time. Jake, we need to talk. I let out a small chuckle. Oh, now you want to talk? Not when you were writing me out of the will. Not when you were expecting me to keep paying your bills while giving Ethan everything. Now suddenly, it's urgent. Dad sighed like I was being difficult. Son, can we come in? I pretended to think about it, then shook my head. No, I don't think so. We can have this conversation right here. Ethan scoffed. Are you serious? Dead serious. Mom huffed, clearly not used to being denied what she wanted. Jake, you're being childish. Childish? I repeated, raising an eyebrow. That's rich, coming from the people who showed up at my house unannounced, pounding on my door like debt collectors. Mom's face turned red, but she took a deep breath, trying to regain control. Listen, she said, shifting to what I called her guilt trip voice. We know you're upset. We understand that you're feeling left out. But you have to look at this rationally. I actually laughed. Rationally? You want to talk about rationality after what you did? Dad, who had been silent up until now, finally decided to chime in. Son, you're doing well for yourself. You have a good job, a stable life. Ethan, well, he needs more help. I turned to Ethan, who was still standing there, arms crossed like this was all beneath him. He needs more help? I repeated. He's 30 years old. He's not a kid. He's had every advantage handed to him while I had to work for everything I have. And now, after all that, you decided he deserves to inherit everything while I get nothing. Ethan smirked. It's not my fault you didn't fight for it. I stared at him, genuinely stunned by how shameless he was. Fight for it. I repeated, my voice quiet. Fight for what? My own parents' love? My own share of what should have been an equal inheritance. Mom waved a hand dismissively. Oh, stop being dramatic. We just thought it made sense. You don't need the money, Jake. That's not the point, I snapped. It's not about needing the money. It's about fairness. It's about the fact that you used me for years, took my help, took my money, took my time, and then tossed me aside like I was nothing when it came to the one thing that should have been fair. Mom's eyes flashed. Jake, we are your parents. We raised you. The least you could do is show us some respect. I laughed, a short, sharp sound. Respect? You want respect when you've shown me none. Ethan rolled his eyes. God, you're so dramatic. You're seriously throwing a tantrum over this? You're acting like you're some poor, struggling victim. I turned to him, my voice ice cold. You're really one to talk about struggling, huh? When's the last time you had to work a full-time job without mom and dad bailing you out? Oh, wait. You never have. That wiped the smug look off his face. But before he could fire back, Mom cut in again. Enough, she snapped. Then she took a deep breath, smoothing out her features. Look, Jake, this is not how I wanted this conversation to go. But the reality is, you're family. And family takes care of each other. I could practically hear the trap she was setting. Oh, I said, not giving her anything. She sighed, as if this was exhausting for her. The mortgage is due. I tilted my head. And we're a little short this month. I couldn't help it. I actually laughed. Are you serious? After everything you just said, after standing here defending your choices, you're still asking me for money. Mom's lips pressed into a thin line. Jake, we're asking you to do the right thing. There it was. The manipulation. The guilt tripping. The expectation that no matter how badly they treated me, I would still come running when they needed me. I took a deep breath, looked each of them in the eye, and said, "No." Mom flinched like I'd slapped her. "Excuse me." I said no. I repeated, my voice steady. "I'm not paying a single cent. Not now, not ever again." Ethan let out a low whistle. "Wow, so that's it, huh? You're just gonna let your own parents lose their home over some petty grudge?" I stared at him. "You live there too, don't you? Maybe you should step up and pay for once in your life." His face darkened. "You're selfish, Jake." Mom, however, wasn't done. "Jake," she said, her voice dangerously low, "do you really want to do this? Do you really want to walk away from your family over money?" I met her gaze without flinching. "That's funny," I said. "Because from where I'm standing, you walked away from me first." She opened her mouth, but I didn't let her speak. "You made your choice. You chose Ethan. You chose to leave me out. Well, now I'm making my choice. And I choose to be done." I stepped back and, without another word, shut the door in their faces. For a few seconds, there was silence. Then I heard Mom's muffled voice through the door. "This isn't over, Jake." I smiled to myself. No, it wasn't. Because something told me they were about to learn just how badly they'd messed up. I didn't expect them to leave right away. My mother wasn't the kind of person to back down when she thought she was owed something. Sure enough, less than a minute after I shut the door, the knocking started again. This time, louder, angrier. "Jake!" Mom's voice was shrill, barely muffled through the door. "You're making a huge mistake. You're going to regret this." I leaned against the door, arms crossed, listening to her rant. Dad, ever the quiet follower, muttered something I couldn't quite make out, probably trying to calm her down. But Ethan, ever the golden child, had no such patience. "You're such a selfish piece of garbage, you know that?" he shouted. "All those years we took care of you." That actually made me laugh. I swung the door back open just enough to glare at him. "You took care of me? That's funny, Ethan. Because I seem to remember working 2 jobs in college while you had Mom and Dad paying your rent. I seem to remember lending you money that you never paid back. I seem to remember bailing Mom and Dad out while you sat around doing nothing." His smug expression wavered, but he quickly recovered. "Well, I was the one they trusted with their estate, wasn't I? Maybe you're just mad that you weren't good enough." I clenched my jaw, inhaling sharply. This is what he wanted. He wanted to get under my skin, to make me react, to make me lash out so that I'd be the one looking like the bad guy. I refused to give him that satisfaction. Instead, I simply smiled. "Good luck with that estate, then. I'm sure it'll be real helpful when you're struggling to pay the mortgage next month." I shut the door again. This time, they didn't knock. For a moment, there was silence. Then I heard my mother's voice, lower this time, but still carrying that same venom. "This is not over, Jake." I smirked. "Yes, Mom," I muttered under my breath. "It really is." The next few days went by in a blur of tension. I expected them to try something, maybe send a passive-aggressive text, maybe get my extended family involved. But to my surprise, nothing came. No calls, no emails, no word from anyone. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, but instead, it felt like the world had just shifted. I wasn't constantly on edge anymore. I wasn't hearing my mother's guilt trips or my dad's weak apologies. It was like they had all vanished, and for once, I could breathe freely. Then, 2 weeks later, I came home from work to a small envelope stuck to my front door. It was white, unmarked, with nothing but my name scribbled across the front in familiar handwriting. I tore it open, expecting something passive-aggressive or manipulative, and I wasn't disappointed. "Jake, this is your last chance. You are throwing everything away for pride. Ethan may have been chosen as executor of the estate, but you are still family. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Come to your senses. You'll regret it." No signature, just the same tired threats. I crumpled it up and threw it in the trash without even a second thought. A few more days passed. Then I received another message. This time, it wasn't a letter. It was an email from my mother's address. Jake, I really thought you'd come around. You're the one who always told us family is everything. Now you're turning your back on us. We're struggling. We need you. Ethan's making a mess of things. Please, let's fix this before it's too late. This time, I actually felt a little something, anger. The audacity to make me feel guilty about their mess. To pull that old card about family is everything, when they had chosen Ethan over me from the start. I took a deep breath, then I deleted the email without replying. It was then that I realized something. I wasn't mad anymore. I was just done. And yet, I still hadn't heard from Ethan. He was silent, his arrogance replaced with something more desperate. I had to admit that part of me was surprised. Ethan, the one who had always believed he was untouchable, wasn't making a move. I half expected him to show up at my door with an apology. But he didn't. Then, one afternoon, out of nowhere, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something told me I should pick up. I answered, and sure enough, it was my mother's voice again. Jake, please. She was crying. I could hear it in her voice, and I was taken aback. You need to come over. Ethan's lost the house. He's messing everything up. We have nowhere to go. Please, we need you to help us. For the first time, I felt nothing. No sympathy, no guilt, no obligation. I almost felt a strange sense of relief. This was it. This was what I had been waiting for. Instead of responding immediately, I let the silence linger. I could feel her desperation across the phone, her need for reassurance, for me to step in and clean up Ethan's mess. But I wasn't about to be dragged back into that cycle of manipulation. No, I finally said, my voice calm. This is your problem, Mom. You've always wanted him to be the golden child, and now you get to deal with the consequences of that choice. You chose him to handle everything. You trusted him. You don't get to pull me into your mess now. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she whispered, Jake, please. I don't know what else to do. I didn't even flinch. I spoke my next words as coldly as I could. You should have thought of that before you decided I wasn't good enough to be part of the family. I hung up. The phone didn't ring again. For weeks, I didn't hear from anyone. But strangely enough, I felt better. The weight of years of resentment and manipulation had finally been lifted. And then one day, while I was at the store, I saw a familiar face in the parking lot. My father. He was walking toward a beat-up car, carrying some bags. I hadn't seen him in weeks. I debated whether to approach him, but something told me that nothing was left to fix. I just turned away, ignoring the way he called my name. That was the last time I saw him. So here I am, a year later. I haven't heard a single word from my parents or Ethan. Part of me wonders if they're still struggling. Part of me wonders if they ever realized what they did wrong. But honestly, I'm okay. Maybe, for once, it's time for me to take care of me. So, Reddit, what do you think? Did I go too far? Should I have tried to fix things instead of shutting them out? Let me know your thoughts. I never imagined my brother would be the person to make me question everything I thought about family. But here I was, standing in the middle of his fancy birthday dinner, completely humiliated in front of a room full of people. My name is Jake, and I'm 27. I've always been the guy who gets called when things go wrong. You need money? Call Jake. Your car's broken? Jake will fix it. Stressed about a life decision? Ask Jake for advice. I never minded being the dependable one. I liked it. It felt good to be needed, to know I was helping out my family. But this was the point where it all went wrong. It all started when Matt, my older brother, turned 30. Matt and I were close growing up, but the older we got, the more distant we became. He married Lisa 2 years ago, and since then, things have felt different. I guess it was just the natural progression of things. He had a wife, his own life, and I was left to support him in every way possible. I didn't mind. I wasn't expecting anything in return. After all, we were family. This birthday party was supposed to be a nice way to celebrate Matt's big 3-0, so when he invited me, I agreed without hesitation. A few weeks before, Lisa sent me an invitation, and I didn't think much of it at the time. But as the day approached, I started getting uneasy. There were subtle things Matt had said, little offhand comments here and there, that made me realize how much I had been taken for granted. Jake, could you help me out with the party arrangements? You know how I am with planning these things, Matt had said, a week before the dinner. I didn't think it was anything out of the ordinary. Sure, I said. I'll help out. What do you need? Well, if you could cover the catering deposit, that'd be great. I'll pay you back when I get paid, he'd replied. as casually as if I'd asked to borrow a book. No problem, I thought. I transferred the money, and everything went ahead. But as the days wore on, I began to feel a gnawing sense of discomfort. It wasn't just the money, it was the way Matt acted as if I was some kind of tool, someone to be used for favors. But I told myself, it's his birthday. Just suck it up and enjoy the night. The day of the party arrived, and I got dressed in a nice suit, picked up a high-end gift for Matt, a smartwatch I knew he'd been eyeing for months, and drove over to the venue. It was a beautiful restaurant, the kind that had dim lighting, polished wood floors, and chandeliers that made everything look more expensive than it actually was. I arrived early, hoping to settle in before things got too chaotic. But as I walked inside, I immediately noticed something off. The first thing that caught my attention was the seating arrangement. It was elaborate, tables arranged in a way that looked like a scene from a wedding, complete with name cards for everyone. There were multiple long tables, each beautifully set, but no one had arrived yet. I looked for my name card. It wasn't there. My stomach dropped. I checked again, scanning each table more carefully, trying to ignore the growing unease in my chest. But there was nothing. Panic started creeping in, and I tried to keep my face neutral. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe they just hadn't put it out yet. So, I stood by the bar, waiting, hoping for someone to show up and explain it away. The room slowly began to fill with guests, friends of Matt and Lisa, distant relatives, and a few coworkers of theirs. Still, no one approached me. Then I saw Lisa. She was talking to a few people near the front, laughing and being the perfect hostess. Her smile never reached her eyes, and that uneasy feeling in my gut grew. I walked up to her, trying to keep my voice calm. "Hey, Lisa, is there a mistake with the seating?" I asked, trying to keep the tone light. She turned, her face lighting up at the sight of me. "Oh, Jake, you're here. That's great," she said, a little too enthusiastically. "Yeah, seating's a little tight. We had to make some adjustments." I smiled, though my insides were starting to churn. "Yeah, but I don't see a place card for me." Her expression shifted for a moment, just a flicker, but it was enough for me to notice. She hesitated before speaking. "Well, we were trying to prioritize the close family and the important guests, you know," she said, her voice taking on that syrupy sweet tone I was starting to despise. "We made some changes at the last minute, but don't worry. I'm sure we'll find a seat for you." I nodded, trying to keep my cool. I wasn't going to make a scene yet, but as I turned to look around, my eyes caught something I didn't expect. There, at the very front of the room, was Matt, sitting with Lisa and a few of their friends, laughing and enjoying himself. He was sitting with all the important guests, all of them in fancy suits and dresses, completely oblivious to the discomfort starting to bubble up inside me. I felt a sting in my chest. I was family. Why wasn't I sitting with them? I turned back to Lisa, feeling the anger rising now. "Lisa, what do you mean by important guests? I'm his brother. Shouldn't I be sitting with the family?" She blinked, clearly caught off guard by my directness. "Oh, well," she said, her voice trailing off. "We had to make some decisions. You know how these things go. We had to have a balance." I felt my hands start to shake. "A balance?" I repeated, my voice thick with frustration. "So, you couldn't find a place for me at the main table, but you've got room for all of Matt's coworkers and their plus ones?" Lisa's smile faltered, but she quickly recovered. "Jake, please don't take it personally. It's just a seating arrangement. You're still part of the evening." I couldn't take it anymore. "This is ridiculous," I snapped, my voice louder now. A few heads turned in my direction. "I've done everything for you too. I loaned Matt money when he needed it. I co-signed on your mortgage. I've done everything to help you two out, and this is how you repay me." Lisa's eyes widened. "Jake, calm down. It's not that big of a deal." I took a deep breath, trying to control my anger. But the words had already escaped, and I couldn't take them back. "Yeah, you're right. It's not a big deal. Just like I'm not a big deal, right?" That's when Matt spoke up, his voice laced with annoyance. "Jake, stop making a scene," he said, his tone cold. "You're being dramatic. Just sit down and enjoy the party." This angered me. I was being dramatic? I'm being dramatic? I repeated, stepping closer to the table, now in full view of everyone. "You know what's dramatic, Matt? Treating your own brother like an afterthought. Like I'm some kind of charity case you can call whenever you need help, but you can't even make room for me at your birthday dinner." The room fell silent. Everyone was watching now. Matt and Lisa looked at each other, their faces turning a shade of red I'd never seen before. And that's when I knew I wasn't leaving until I got what I deserved. The tension in the room thickened like fog, and I could feel every single pair of eyes on me. I wasn't just angry anymore, I was hurt, and there was no turning back from it. Matt leaned back in his chair, looking at me like I had just ruined his entire evening. Lisa looked more uncomfortable than I'd ever seen her, shifting in her seat, her eyes darting from me to Matt like she was trying to figure out whether to side with me or not. But Matt? He wasn't backing down. Instead, he crossed his arms over his chest, trying to put on that air of authority like he had everything under control. I could feel my hands tightening into fists at my sides. I had spent years supporting him, helping him, putting up with his laziness, and yet here I was, standing alone in a room full of people I hardly knew, excluded from the very family I had always tried to help. "You know what?" I said, the words coming out through gritted teeth. "I've done more for you than anyone ever has. I've been the one you've leaned on when you needed a hand. And now, for this birthday, you can't even be bothered to treat me like family. I'm not even close family enough to get a seat at the table." The sarcasm in my voice was biting. I was done playing nice. Lisa's face flushed with embarrassment, but it was Matt who spoke next, his voice low and sharp. "Jake, you're acting like a child. Just sit down, okay? This is ridiculous." I didn't even blink. "I'm not sitting down. Not until I get the respect I deserve. You're treating me like I'm not even part of this family, and I'm done with it." The whole room was now silent, the laughter and clinking of glasses replaced by this heavy, suffocating quiet. People were whispering behind their hands, glancing nervously at each other, unsure of how to react. I could see a few people trying to avoid eye contact, clearly uncomfortable with the scene I was causing. I didn't care. I wasn't doing this for them. I was doing it for me. Matt's face twisted in frustration. "Look, I get it, okay? You're upset. But you're making a spectacle of yourself. You're embarrassing me." I could feel my pulse quicken, and I took a deep breath to steady myself. It would have been so easy to turn around and leave, to say something snarky and storm out of there. But I wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. I wasn't going to let him walk away thinking that he could just dismiss me, like he had done so many times before. I wanted him to know exactly what he had done. "No, Matt," I said, slowly, letting each word settle into the air. "You're embarrassing yourself. You spent your whole life using me. I've been there for you through everything, and all I get is being shoved in the back of the room like an afterthought." I looked at him, really looked at him. My brother. The person who, for so long, I thought I would always be there for, no matter what. But as the words spilled out, I realized something. I didn't want to be this person anymore. I didn't want to be the person who let people walk all over me. "I've been your safety net for years, Matt. But you know what? I'm done." Lisa's mouth opened like she was about to say something, but I wasn't going to let her interrupt me. "Not this time. You're selfish, Matt," I continued, my voice now cutting through the tension. "And that's the reason I'm not going to sit here and pretend this is okay. You don't respect me, and clearly, you don't care. So, you can forget about me continuing to help you when you need it. You don't get that from me anymore." His face went white, but it wasn't the kind of reaction I was hoping for. It was pure anger that flashed in his eyes. "You're threatening me now," he said, his voice rising. "I'm not threatening you," I shot back. "I'm setting a boundary, and I'm done letting you walk all over me." There was a long pause, the kind of silence that was heavy with all the unspoken words we had never said to each other. It was like everything had come to a head in that moment. For a second, I thought maybe I had overdone it. Maybe I had taken things too far. But as I looked around at the guests in the room, I realized I didn't care about their opinions. I didn't care about Matt's embarrassment. What mattered now was me. Matt finally broke the silence. "You're making a huge mistake." His voice was low, more dangerous than before. "I'm your brother. You think I need you?" I didn't say anything, just looked him dead in the eye. He was trying to manipulate me, and it was pathetic. He had always leaned on me, always knew I'd be there, and now that I was finally standing up for myself, he couldn't handle it. Lisa's face was pale now, a mix of shock and discomfort. "Matt," she said quietly, "maybe you should just calm down and—" "No, Lisa. Let him speak. Let him get it all out." I cut her off. "Because I'm done. No more favors. No more loans. No more doing your dirty work. You two want to treat me like I'm invisible? Fine. I'll just start acting like it." I could see it in Matt's eyes now. The fear. The realization that he had pushed me too far. The man who had always relied on me for everything was suddenly starting to see the consequences of taking me for granted. It felt good. It felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. But the night wasn't over yet, and the real turning point was just around the corner. As the silence stretched on, I could feel the weight of the room pressing in on me. Everyone was waiting for someone to say something, but I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing me back down. I wasn't backing off now, no matter what. I took a deep breath, glanced one last time at the faces of the people who had been so quick to judge me, and then my eyes landed on the small box I had carefully wrapped earlier that afternoon. It was nestled in my bag, and I had been holding on to it all evening like it was some sort of tether. A tether to a family that had never really treated me as part of it. But now, it felt more like a weight. I walked over to the table where Matt was sitting, his arms still crossed tightly over his chest, his face twisted with a mix of anger and confusion. He was avoiding eye contact, but I wasn't going to let him off the hook. I reached into my bag, pulling out the small, neatly wrapped gift I had spent hours picking out. A smartwatch, something I knew he had been eyeing for months. I had saved up for it for weeks, knowing how much he would appreciate the gesture. I wanted to show him that I cared, that I was there for him, despite everything. But now, with everything that had happened, that gift suddenly felt like a joke. I held it up for him to see, and his eyes widened. I could tell that he wasn't expecting this. He thought, maybe, that I was just going to storm off in anger, but I wasn't giving him that. Not anymore. I wasn't going to just leave quietly. Here, I said, my voice steady, but there was a bite to it. This is for you. I thought you'd appreciate it, considering how much you've been talking about it. Matt's eyebrows furrowed as he glanced at the box, then back at me. For a second, I thought he was going to reach out for it. But instead, he just blinked, confused. Jake, what's this? He asked, his voice now tinged with uncertainty. I held the box just out of his reach. It's the smartwatch you've been wanting, remember? The one you've been talking about for weeks. The one I thought would be a good way to show you that I care. I could see the shift in his expression. That confusion started to turn into realization, then into something else. Fear. A kind of genuine fear that I had never seen in him before. Maybe it was the first time in our lives that he wasn't sure he could get away with pushing me around. You're not leaving with it, are you? Matt asked, his voice trembling slightly, like he wasn't sure whether he was joking or not. I shook my head slowly, and I could feel a cruel satisfaction bubbling up inside me. Oh, I am. In fact, I'm taking it with me. This, I said, tapping the box lightly, was for a brother I thought I could count on. For someone who valued our relationship. But now, I'm taking it back because I realize that I've been an idiot to believe that this gift meant anything to you. I've been an idiot to believe you valued me. There was a heavy pause, and I could see the shock and frustration on his face, but honestly, I didn't care. I stepped back, clutching the box to my chest, and I could feel every eye in the room following me. The quiet had turned to murmurs. I wasn't just leaving with the gift. No, I was making a statement. I wasn't going to let Matt think he could treat me like I was disposable. I turned on my heel and started toward the door, my heart pounding in my chest. Behind me, I heard Matt's voice rise, desperate, though tinged with anger. Jake, don't do this. I didn't stop. As I walked past the front hall, I could hear him calling my name again, but it was too late. The years of resentment, of taking care of him, of carrying him, all came crashing down in that moment. And I wasn't going to let him get away with it anymore. I stepped outside, into the cool night air, clutching the small box like it was a shield. The gift that had once been a symbol of my loyalty to him now felt like a weight of everything I'd been carrying for too long. I was done. Done trying to prove myself. Done being the one to always come to the rescue. Done letting him treat me like I didn't matter. But as I stood there, the cool night breeze brushing against my face, I felt this strange sense of calm. A clarity I hadn't felt in ages. Maybe I had lost a brother tonight, but I was gaining something so much more valuable, my peace. And it felt good. It's been a few weeks since the party, and I still haven't heard from Matt. Not that I'm surprised. He hasn't even bothered to apologize for what went down. In fact, he hasn't really reached out at all. At first, I felt a bit guilty. I questioned myself, wondering if maybe I went too far, if taking the gift back was a step too harsh. But then I remembered everything that led up to that night. The constant feeling of being taken for granted, the way he always expected me to be there for him, but never once returned the favor, and how, when it came down to it, I wasn't even considered important enough to sit with the adults at my own brother's birthday. I haven't really had a chance to sit down and think about everything properly until recently. It's funny, you know, how you can carry all this weight for years, holding on to it because you think family should come first, and then one day, it just clicks. That's what happened to me that night. That was the moment I realized that maybe family doesn't always get to dictate how things should be. I get to decide what my relationships look like, too. Matt hasn't reached out, but neither has anyone else in the family. It's like they've all sided with him. There's this sort of unspoken understanding that I was in the wrong. I see them posting on social media, all the pictures from the birthday dinner, and I just scroll past. I've learned the hard way that family can be toxic just like anyone else. And just because we are related doesn't mean I owe anyone my time or loyalty when they don't treat me with respect. I don't know if Matt is even aware of how much he messed up. Part of me wants him to come to me and apologize, but another part of me knows that if he hasn't figured it out by now, then maybe it's not even worth it. Maybe I've spent so many years trying to be the bigger person that I forgot to value myself in the process. Since then, I've been doing better. I've had more time for myself, for the things that matter to me. I've been reconnecting with friends I'd lost touch with, and I've focused on personal goals. It's like this weight has been lifted. Sure, it's tough not having the relationship with my brother that I thought I would, but at the same time, I feel more free. More me. And you know what? That smartwatch that I took back, I ended up keeping it. It's mine now, and every time I look at it, I feel this small sense of pride. Not because it's expensive or anything, but because it's a reminder that I finally took a stand for myself. And in a strange way, it's kind of my symbol of reclaiming my life. So, here I am now, thinking about whether I did the right thing. Was I too harsh? Or did I finally draw a line in the sand that needed to be drawn? Honestly, I don't know, but I'm curious to hear what you all think. Have any of you been in a situation like this where you've had to cut ties with family members who didn't treat you right? How did it go for you? Did you regret it? Or did it end up being the best thing for you in the long run? I'd love to hear your thoughts. My name is Ryan. I'm 27 years old, and if you ask my family, I'm the one who never really made it. That's how they see me, anyway. I didn't go to college, didn't get a fancy degree, didn't walk across any polished campus stage while pomp and circumstance echoed through a hall of beaming parents. No, I went a different route. I started working right out of high school, apprenticed with a local electrician, worked long hours, learned the trade, and now I run my own contracting business. I have a steady client base, decent savings, and my own apartment in the city. It's not glamorous, but I'm proud of what I've built. The only problem is that none of that matters to my family, not when they've got him. My younger brother, Caleb, the golden boy. Caleb just graduated summa cum laude from a prestigious university with a double major in political science and economics. He already had job offers lined up before the ink dried on his diploma. My parents couldn't stop bragging. Mom had been posting countdowns to his graduation dinner on Facebook for weeks, calling it a once-in-a-lifetime event, like it was some kind of royal coronation. I hadn't been particularly eager to attend, but Caleb called me personally a few days before and said, "Come on, man. It would mean a lot if you were there." That was rare. Caleb's always been wrapped up in his own world, but he sounded sincere. So I took the night off, put on a clean dress shirt, and drove 45 minutes out to the fancy Italian restaurant Mom had picked for the celebration. It was one of those places where the lighting is low, the menus are leather-bound, and even the bread has its own plate. The kind of place that smells like wealth and whispers. I walked in a few minutes early, scanning the dining area until I saw them. Mom, Dad, Caleb, my two aunts and uncles, both sets of grandparents, and Caleb's girlfriend. Everyone was seated at a long table with crisp white linens, laughing and sipping wine. The waiter was pouring glasses as I approached. Then I noticed it. There were no empty seats. I paused, standing at the end of the table, trying to figure out if maybe a chair had just been shifted or moved. Mom glanced up at me, blinked like I was an unexpected customer interrupting her meal, and then looked me up and down. Her lips curled into a tight smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh, Ryan, you made it." I nodded slowly, still standing there like a fool. "Yeah, Caleb invited me." She gave a little laugh and waved a hand toward the end of the table. "Well, we didn't expect you to actually come. There's no room at the main table, but I'm sure the waiter can seat you somewhere. Maybe by the bar." She turned back to him, then added with a tone soaked in condescension, "You didn't go to college, so you don't belong at the main table anyway." It hit me like a slap, blunt, embarrassing, and loud in a room that had suddenly gone too quiet. I glanced at Caleb. He looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. He wouldn't meet my eyes. The waiter, an older man with a kind face, looked between us, clearly unsure of how to proceed. I could feel heat rising in my face. I wanted to leave right then, but something in me, some quiet stubbornness, kept my feet rooted to the floor. "It's fine," I said tightly. "Whatever works." The waiter guided me to a small two-person table near the back, practically pressed against a decorative wine rack. I sat alone while the rest of my family toasted Caleb with champagne and passed around appetizers I wasn't offered. Every now and then, someone would glance my way, then quickly look back. I was a ghost in my own family's celebration. When the waiter came around again, he looked genuinely apologetic. "Would you like to order, sir?" I shook my head. "I'll wait." And I did. I sat there through course after course. They laughed loudly at stories I wasn't a part of, clinked glasses, and posed for pictures. Caleb in the middle, Mom and Dad beaming beside him. At one point, I heard Mom say to the waiter, "We'll take the 2014 Emerone." Yes, the reserve bottle. She said it like she was pronouncing a magic spell, like just saying the name gave her class. Hours passed. Not once did anyone invite me over, ask how I was doing, or even pretend to include me in the conversation. The longer I sat there, the heavier everything felt. The years of being second best, the quiet jabs, the dismissive comments at holidays, the way my parents always introduced Caleb with his full list of achievements and me as just our oldest. This dinner was just the latest chapter in a long book I never asked to be written. When dessert came around, some kind of elaborate chocolate thing with gold flakes, I noticed Caleb glance toward me. His expression shifted for just a second, like maybe he felt a little bad. But then Mom leaned in and whispered something in his ear, and he laughed. That was it. That was the moment I decided. Not to explode, not to cause a scene, but to watch, to wait. The bill came not long after. The waiter, clearly uncomfortable, walked back over with a sleek black folder and a tight smile. "Will this all be on one check?" he asked. My family paused. They all looked toward Dad, who looked toward Mom, who reached for her purse like she'd rehearsed it. But then she turned to me. "Ryan," she said smoothly, "you brought your card, didn't you?" I blinked. "Excuse me." "Well, we thought you'd want to cover it. You know, as a gesture, since you've been doing well with your little business and all." She said it sweetly, like she was offering me a great honor. "It's only fair that you contribute something to your brother's big night." The audacity was stunning. She hadn't even given me a chair at the table, and now she wanted me to pay for the whole thing? The waiter quietly cleared his throat. "Total comes to $2,800, he said, "not including tip." I stood up slowly, pushed in my chair, and reached for my jacket. "Where are you going?" Mom asked sharply. I shrugged it on, then looked at the waiter, offering him a small, apologetic smile. "Not the one who doesn't belong," I said simply. And with that, I walked out. The door swung closed behind me with a satisfying click. I didn't look back. But trust me, I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. I drove home that night with a strange mix of emotions buzzing in my chest. Anger, shame, clarity. But mostly anger. Not the kind that burns hot and explodes. The cold kind. The kind that settles in and simmers, that sharpens your focus instead of clouding it. I didn't cry. I didn't scream into my steering wheel. I just gripped it tighter and let every memory flood back, stacking itself neatly on top of the one from tonight. That graduation dinner wasn't an isolated moment. It was the latest in a long line of quiet humiliations I'd learned to swallow. I didn't sleep much. I stared at the ceiling of my apartment, thinking about how my mom had looked at me, like I was some background extra in her movie, like I wasn't her son. And the part that stung the most? Caleb didn't stop her. He didn't say, "Hey, Ryan should sit with us." He didn't tell the waiter to grab another chair. He didn't even text afterward to ask why I left. And maybe I shouldn't have expected him to. Caleb had always been the favorite. Ever since we were kids, it was like he wore a spotlight. Straight A's, piano recitals, student council. Meanwhile, I struggled with math, hated crowds, and preferred taking things apart in the garage. I wasn't dumb, I just wasn't him. And that meant Mom never really saw me. There's a specific kind of pain in being tolerated by your own parents. A few days passed before I heard anything from them. Not a call, not a text, nothing. It was like I'd never even been there. Then, that Friday, I got a message from my dad. "Hey, we need you to come over and help us fix the ceiling fan in the den. It's acting up again." No, how are you? No mention of the dinner. Just another casual request, like I was the family handyman they could call whenever something needed tightening or replacing. I left the message on read. That afternoon, Mom sent me a follow-up. Your father asked you to help. Please don't be difficult. I stared at that one for a long time. Don't be difficult. That was her way of saying, don't remind us that we treat you like garbage. Just keep doing your job. Eventually, I replied, busy with clients this week. Hire someone. She didn't answer. The next time I saw them was at a family barbecue hosted by my Uncle Dave a few weekends later. I debated not going, but Uncle Dave had always been decent to me, and I knew my grandparents would be there too. So I showed up. This time, I came prepared. Clean jeans, fresh haircut, brought a bottle of decent scotch as a gift. I knew what was coming. I just didn't expect it to start so fast. Look who actually decided to join us, Mom said the moment I stepped into the backyard. She was standing near the grill, sunglasses perched on her head, wine glass already in hand. Hopefully you don't walk out before dessert this time. I forced a smile. Good to see you too. Caleb was already holding court by the patio, telling some story about his new job offer in DC. Everyone was hanging on his every word. My grandparents gave me warm hugs and asked how business was going, but that was it. No one asked about the jobs I'd completed or the apartment I'd renovated recently. Caleb's girlfriend even made a snide joke when I said I'd parked a few blocks away. Oh yeah, I forgot. Contractors don't get valet service. I brushed it off. I'd learned to let those things roll off my back, at least on the outside. Later in the evening, my dad cornered me while I was pouring myself a drink. Listen, Ryan, he said, his tone low and slightly annoyed. I don't know what happened at the dinner, but your mother's been really upset. She planned that night for weeks. I stared at him. There wasn't even a seat for me. He blinked. Well, you weren't exactly the focus of the night. It was Caleb's celebration, and yet you expected me to pay for it. He waved a hand dismissively. That was your mother's idea. She thought it would be a kind gesture. It was a $2,800 bill, Dad. Exactly. You can afford it. There it was. That assumption that I owed them something, simply because I wasn't a failure. Because I had money, I should help. But I wasn't invited as family. I was invited as a wallet. I didn't respond. I just walked away and joined Uncle Dave near the smoker. We talked about cars, about a job he needed help with at his cabin, and for a little while, I almost forgot about everything else. Until dessert came. That's when Mom raised her glass and announced to everyone, I just want to thank Caleb again for making this family so proud. It's so rare that someone from our background rises to such heights. You've given us all hope. Then she turned and looked directly at me. Maybe someday Ryan will surprise us too. The silence that followed was suffocating. Caleb chuckled awkwardly. My aunt coughed. Someone dropped a fork. I stood there, holding my drink, wondering if this was the moment I should snap. Should I call her out? Should I remind her that my business had put me in the top income bracket last year? That I'd bought and flipped 3 homes while she still made monthly payments on their car? Instead, I set the glass down and walked away again. But this time, I wasn't leaving to lick my wounds. I was done pretending. I started thinking, planning. Because the truth is, I had something they didn't know. Something I hadn't shared. And that something? It was about to change everything. That night after the barbecue, I couldn't sleep again. But this time it wasn't because I was sad or hurt. I was wired. My mother's final jab about me surprising them someday played on a loop in my head like a bad song you can't turn off. The gall of it. The smugness. I wasn't just being dismissed anymore. I was being mocked in front of people who once changed my diapers. But while I was trying to shake it off, something strange happened. Around midnight, my phone buzzed with an email alert from my accountant. Subject line, urgent, withdrawal request flagged. I opened it, confused. The message said that a large withdrawal attempt had been flagged from one of my business accounts, an account that was strictly for materials and payroll. The amount? $8,750. My heart stopped. I called the bank's 24-hour fraud line immediately. The woman on the other end was calm and efficient. She confirmed that yes, someone had attempted to initiate a wire transfer using my company credentials. Thankfully, the fraud filter held it up because the IP address was unfamiliar and the beneficiary details didn't match any existing vendors. I logged into my account. There, in my access logs, was an IP address I didn't recognize, but the recovery email used to verify the transaction attempt, that was mine. Or it used to be. Except now, My recovery email had a secondary backup I hadn't added. My stomach dropped. I spent the rest of the night unraveling it. It turned out someone had managed to access my business email, the one I used for billing and client contracts, and tried to reroute funds by posing as me. They'd even drafted a fake invoice from a made-up supplier. It was sloppy, reckless, and it only made sense once I started thinking about who had access to my personal laptop. One I used for work stuff years ago, the one I gave to my parents as a loaner back when they were dealing with their busted desktop. I never got it back. My fingers were ice as I texted Caleb the next morning. Hey, quick question. Have you been using the old laptop I gave mom and dad? He responded in less than a minute. Yeah, needed it for something. Why? No guilt. No hesitation. I didn't even have to ask. It all clicked. Caleb, the golden boy, the family prodigy, had accessed my personal files, somehow gotten into my business records, and tried to steal from me. And if the fraud filter hadn't caught it, he would have gotten away with it. And no one would have believed me if I accused him, not after the way my family pedestalized him. I didn't respond right away. I needed to process it. I needed proof. And I got it fast. I had my tech guy, Colin, a buddy I'd worked with on security installs, help me retrieve the access logs, including timestamps, IP matching, and even the attempt to change my backup recovery email. It all pointed back to one thing: a login attempt from my parents' home Wi-Fi network, from the laptop I had once generously given them. But that wasn't the worst part. Later that afternoon, I got a call from my mom. Hey, sweetheart, she started, like nothing had happened. I know things have been tense lately, but Caleb told me you reached out to him? Something about the laptop. I kept my voice even. Yeah, someone used it to try to access my business account. There was a pause. Then she laughed. Laughed. Oh, come on. Don't be dramatic. Caleb wouldn't do something like that. I have logs, Mom. Another pause. This time longer. Well, her voice dropped, like she was trying to pivot the conversation. You did leave a lot of your old stuff on there. Maybe you should have wiped it first. I blinked. Are you blaming me for this? She sighed, and her tone shifted into that clipped, scolding edge she always used when I dared talk back as a teenager. Look, Ryan, I don't know what you're fishing for, but this is not the kind of thing we air out to the rest of the family. You always have to create drama. Your brother just graduated, he's under a lot of pressure, and now you're accusing him of stealing. I'm not accusing. I'm telling you what happened. Then maybe you should take it up with your bank, not your brother. She hung up, just like that. I stood there, phone still in hand, not even surprised anymore. That call wasn't about truth. It was about containment, damage control, not because she believed Caleb was innocent, but because, deep down, I think she knew he did it. And she didn't care. Or worse, she thought he was entitled to it. That's when I knew. This wasn't just favoritism anymore. This was betrayal. Not just from Caleb, but from my entire family. They didn't see me as their son or sibling. I was a resource, a backup plan, an ATM with a heartbeat. The one they could quietly disrespect because they believed I'd never walk away. But I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't even going to confront Caleb directly. I was going to do what they'd never expect from the lesser son. I was going to outsmart them. Because while they'd been playing favorites, I'd been building something. And now I was going to use it. After that call with my mother, everything felt different. There wasn't a sudden explosion, no dramatic falling out, just this awful silence. The kind that creeps in when something important has died and nobody wants to admit it. I wasn't angry anymore. Not in the yelling, storming off sense. I was just numb. That cold, hollow numbness that sinks into your bones when you finally understand you're not part of the family you thought you were. I went to work like usual the next day, but I moved on autopilot. I installed light fixtures in a new condo, took measurements for a kitchen remodel, answered emails. But I wasn't really there. Every time my phone buzzed, I'd tense, thinking maybe someone in the family had come to their senses, that Caleb would call and apologize, that my mom would admit she was wrong, that maybe, just maybe, someone would choose me for once. They didn't. Not that day. Not that week. Not even when I sent a short message to the family group chat. I have evidence that someone used my business email and account to attempt a wire transfer. It was blocked. This is serious. Whoever did it needs to come forward before I take legal steps. No one replied. Not even a question. They read it. I saw the read receipts and went on with their lives. I didn't know what hurt more, the betrayal itself or the fact that it didn't seem to matter to any of them. That they could ignore something so serious, so deliberate, and pretend it hadn't happened. All because it was easier to keep Caleb on his pedestal and me in the shadows. The following weekend, I visited my parents' house. Not to fight, not to confront. I told them I needed to pick up some tools I'd left in the garage years ago. I didn't bother ringing the bell. I had a key. The house smelled like furniture polish and lemon air freshener. Familiar, almost comforting. I walked past the living room, where a giant canvas of Caleb in his graduation gown now hung above the fireplace. My mother had framed it in gold. In the garage, I found the old laptop on a shelf, half covered in dust. I slipped it into my backpack and left without saying a word. Back at home, I spent hours going through the files. I pulled the hard drive, cloned it, and gave it to Colin. Find everything, I told him. Even deleted files. He didn't ask questions. He just nodded. While he worked, I started cleaning out my apartment. Not because I was moving, not yet, but because I needed clarity. I boxed up the family photos. Birthday cards from years past. That old wood carving Caleb made me in 7th grade that I'd kept on my shelf for reasons I no longer understood. I packed it all away. Every reminder of a version of my family that never really existed. A few days later, I went to visit my grandparents. They lived about 30 minutes outside the city, in a small cottage surrounded by apple trees. My grandfather had taught me how to rewire a fuse box when I was 12. He was one of the few people in my family who had ever treated me like I mattered. When I arrived, they were sitting on the porch sipping sweet tea. My grandmother's face lit up when she saw me. "Oh, Ryan, we were just talking about you." I smiled, but it was tight. "Yeah? What about?" She patted the seat beside her. "Your mom's worried, sweetie. She says you've been distant, and that you've been saying some things about Caleb." I sat down slowly. "Did she mention what Caleb did?" "She said you accused him of stealing from you. That it was some kind of misunderstanding. That you overreacted." I looked at my grandfather. He didn't say anything, just watched me carefully. I took a breath. It wasn't a misunderstanding. He tried to move money out of my business account using my credentials. I have proof. And Mom told me to take it up with the bank. My grandmother's smile faded. "Oh." Grandpa spoke for the first time. "Do you have the police involved?" "Not yet." He nodded slowly. "You should." The rest of the visit was quiet. Kind but stiff. Like they didn't quite know what to say, or didn't want to believe it. I left before dinner, hugging them both tightly. That drive home was when I realized I'd hit bottom. Not financially, not in terms of success, but emotionally. I had no one left to lean on. No one in my family believed me, or wanted to. I was the villain in their story now, the one who was ruining Caleb's future with wild accusations. I stayed home the next day. I didn't go to job sites, didn't answer emails. I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad and a pen, and I started writing. Everything. Dates. Messages. Conversations. Transactions. I created a timeline. Documented the evidence. Laid it out like a case file. Not to go nuclear. Not yet. But because I knew I needed to stop pretending things would fix themselves. That evening, Colin texted me. "You're going to want to see this. Meet tomorrow." The message made my pulse spike. Something told me he'd found what I was hoping for, or maybe what I feared. But even as I stared at the screen, my heart already racing, I felt a strange sense of calm. Because I wasn't the one spiraling anymore. They were. And I was finally, getting ready to take control. The next morning, I met Colin at a quiet cafe near the tech firm where he worked. He was already at a back table with his laptop open, sipping black coffee and looking unusually serious. When I sat down, he turned the screen toward me. "Buckle up," he said. He'd recovered more than I expected. Deleted files, cached logins, even old drafts of the fake invoice Caleb had created. And then there it was, the smoking gun. A document labeled test_invoice_draft2, dated just 3 days before the wire transfer attempt, with Caleb's name still in the metadata. Not only that, but the file had been accessed from an IP address that matched one of Caleb's known devices, a laptop registered under a student license from his university account. Colin had cross-verified the IP with some public information he could pull from school forums Caleb had posted on years ago. "This isn't just shady," Colin said. "It's criminal." He handed me a USB drive with all the files and logs neatly organized. I sat there for a moment, quiet. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "Yeah, I think I am." Because finally, I wasn't playing defense. I wasn't sitting in a corner hoping my family would see me, hoping they'd listen, hoping someone would do the right thing. I had the truth, and I had it in a form they couldn't dismiss. Still, I didn't go to the police. Not yet. Instead, I went back to work, with purpose. That week, I landed a huge contract for a series of luxury townhouses outside the city. It was the kind of job that came with media coverage and a fat payday. I'd built enough credibility over the years that I didn't have to pitch hard. They knew my name. My work spoke for itself. I upgraded my website, hired 2 full-time assistants, bought new equipment, rented a small office space downtown with a glass door and my logo in sleek lettering. Ryan Archer Contracting, clean, reliable, trusted. It felt surreal, like I was finally stepping into the version of myself I'd been working toward for years, but without the weight of trying to prove it to anyone who didn't want to see it. And then something unexpected happened. I got a call from a local magazine that covered small business owners and entrepreneurs. One of the editors had heard about my townhouse project and wanted to do a feature, a local success story spotlight. They came to the job site, took pictures, interviewed me. I told them about my start, my apprenticeship, the slow grind of building a business from scratch. They asked about family. I smiled and said, "Let's just say I come from a place where I learned the hard way that success doesn't always mean support." The article came out the following month. It wasn't viral, but it got attention. Clients started referencing it when they reached out. And of course, my mom saw it. She texted me one morning, out of nowhere. "Saw the article. You look good in a hard hat. Maybe now you'll get some respect. No congratulations. No, I'm proud of you." Just another dig wrapped in a compliment. I didn't reply. I was done begging for recognition. Instead, I forwarded the article to my grandfather. He called me an hour later. "I read every word," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "You've built something to be proud of. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." That meant more than any Facebook post ever could. I was rising, and they couldn't ignore it anymore. Caleb might have had a diploma, but I had something far more dangerous: receipts, success, and independence. And now, I was in a position they didn't expect, a place of power with nothing to lose. And just when I thought I might leave things be, a wedding invitation arrived in my mailbox. White envelope, gold trim, my full name written in ornate cursive. "You are cordially invited to the engagement party of Caleb Archer and Natalie Klein." The date was 2 weeks away. The location? A private country club. Expensive. Exclusive. I turned the card over. At the bottom, in small print, formal attire. Adults only. Contributions toward the celebration are welcome. There it was. Subtle. Slimy. They were trying again, pulling me back in, expecting I'd come, smile, hand over a fat envelope, and pretend none of this had happened. But they didn't know that I already had a plan. Because I wasn't just going to show up. I was going to make sure this time they'd never forget I was there. I didn't RSVP. I didn't call to decline either. Instead, I pinned the invitation to my fridge and looked at it like a blueprint. Because that's what it was. Not a celebration, not a peace offering, but a message. One last jab. They were daring me to show up, daring me to either cave or be forgotten again. And the thing about me? I never respond the way they expect. The next few days, I went into full planning mode. I knew this couldn't be some petty act. It had to be clean, undeniable, and most importantly, public. Not just for the satisfaction, but because if there was anything my mother hated more than being called out, it was being embarrassed in front of people who mattered. And this country club engagement party? That was going to be her crowning moment. High society, catered food, elegant outfits, polite applause. She wasn't throwing it for Caleb. She was throwing it through him. He was the means. The real guest of honor was her ego. I just had to find the right way to crack it. Then came a lucky break. 2 days before the party, I had lunch with a longtime client, Meredith. She was a sharp, no-nonsense attorney who'd hired me a few years ago to redo her home office. Over time, we'd become something between friends and colleagues. She knew I wasn't close with my family, but I'd never gone into the full story. That day, though, I told her everything. Not the dramatic flourishes, just the facts. The financial betrayal, the denial, the silent treatment, the wedding invite. She listened without interrupting. And when I was done, she leaned forward and asked, "Do you want to burn them? Or just prove they can't touch you anymore?" I blinked. What's the difference? One is emotional. The other is permanent. Then she slid her business card across the table and flipped it over. On the back, She scribbled a name, Jonathan Marsh, CPA. Call him, she said. Tell him I sent you. He handles financial forensics. Quietly. It took me 5 minutes after I got home to dial the number. Jonathan was older, sharp-eyed, and efficient. After I explained the situation and forwarded the USB drive Colin had created, he asked, "Has your business ever been formally audited?" "No," I said. "I've kept everything clean." "Good. Because if there's any mess in your books, it'll reflect badly once this goes public." I sat up straighter. "Public?" He didn't smile. "We're not just documenting a crime here, Mr. Archer. We're documenting intent. Your brother accessed a protected system using unauthorized credentials. That's corporate fraud, attempted embezzlement, and identity theft." He paused. "Depending on how far he went, possibly federal." My jaw tightened. "I don't want him in jail." "Then don't press charges. But build the case anyway. That way, you decide how far it goes." For the next week, I worked double time, business during the day, strategy at night. With Jonathan's help, I compiled everything into a single clean, undeniable report. Timestamps, access logs, metadata, bank statement flags, a detailed timeline, all packaged in a professional binder with a cover page titled Unauthorized Access and Financial Misconduct. Internal summary, Ryan Archer Contracting LLC. The plan wasn't to shout. It was to drop the truth like a weight, quietly, calmly, where it couldn't be ignored. 2 days before the party, I got another message from my mother. "Still haven't heard if you're coming. We're finalizing the seating chart. Let me know." I didn't reply. Instead, I sent the report. Express mail, signature required, addressed directly to her home, in a sleek white envelope. No note, no threats, just the facts. And then I called the country club. I didn't need to know their menu or decor. I needed something else, the guest list. It wasn't easy. They don't just give that kind of thing out. But I called as a vendor, pretending to be confirming details on behalf of Mr. Archer. After a few polite questions, I got what I needed. The event planner's name, the head of catering, and the name of the event photographer. That last one mattered, because in my pocket, I had a copy of the magazine article, the one that painted me as a respected local entrepreneur. And in the back of that article was a note. Photography by Kara Bishop. Same photographer. Same woman who'd done my article. I called her that afternoon. "Ryan Archer," she said brightly. "That feature of you got more clicks than anything I've done all year. You look like a guy who knew what he was doing." "I try," I said with a small laugh. "Listen, I hear you're shooting my brother's engagement party this weekend." She paused. "Oh, didn't know he had a brother." "Yeah, happens a lot." Then I explained my situation, not the dirty parts, just enough to say, "Would you mind if I had a quick chat with you during the event? Just 5 minutes. No drama. I promise." She agreed. And that's when the final piece fell into place. The story didn't need me to scream or flip tables. All I had to do was show up, let them pretend I was invisible, and then make sure everyone watched what happened next. The day of the engagement party arrived bright and cloudless. The kind of day my mother would call perfect for photos. I'd never been to this country club before, the kind with valet parking, polished stone fountains, and manicured hedges trimmed within an inch of their life. But I didn't show up in a designer tuxedo or anything flashy. I wore exactly what I'd worn in the article's photo shoot: dark jeans, pressed white shirt, tailored navy jacket. Clean, sharp, unpretentious. I wasn't there to impress. I was there to make a point. The valet opened my door like I was royalty. I gave him a nod and stepped inside. And immediately, I saw it, the illusion. Crystal glasses clinking, strings of fairy lights twinkling in the afternoon sun, guests milling around in pastel dresses and polished shoes. My family's friends. My mother's circle. Caleb's new world. And I was the ghost again. The stranger walking through a painting he didn't belong in. But not this time. I spotted Kara, the photographer, near the back patio, adjusting her lens. When she saw me, her eyes lit up in recognition, and she gave me a quick nod. Then, without a word, she angled her lens and snapped a few photos of me walking through the event. That would come in handy later. I headed straight for the drinks table and poured myself a glass of sparkling water. I knew the moment they saw me. You could feel it. Heads turning. Whispers. Then, like a curtain parting, my mother approached. Her smile was tight, frozen in place. "Ryan," she said, her voice soft but sharp. "Didn't expect you to come after all." I sipped my water. Why wouldn't I come? Family event, right? She glanced around, clearly uncomfortable that we were already drawing attention. Well, we just weren't sure you got the message. We finalized the seating and… I don't need a seat, I said calmly. I won't be staying that long. Her jaw tightened, but before she could reply, Caleb appeared. He looked good. I'll give him that. Expensive suit, clean shave, confident smile. The golden boy. The groom-to-be. Hey, he said, almost breezy. Didn't think you'd make it, man. Yeah, I replied. A lot of that going around. He chuckled awkwardly. Listen, I know things got weird. Mom told me you were upset about the money stuff. It's a misunderstanding. It's over now, right? I looked him dead in the eye. You don't have to lie, Caleb. I know what you did. He blinked. What are you talking about? I didn't answer. I just pulled the envelope from inside my jacket. Not the full binder, just the summary page with the key evidence. The timestamps. The IP logs. His name in the document metadata. The damning invoice. And on top, a simple cover sheet with the title. Attempted Financial Fraud, Internal Summary. I handed it to him slowly. He looked down at it, scanned the top page, and his face paled. Mom snatched it from his hand, skimmed it, and immediately turned to me. What is this supposed to be? Some stunt? No, I said quietly. It's evidence. I've already filed a preliminary report with my legal counsel. If I wanted, I could take this to the police today. You want to talk about stunts? That wire transfer attempt could have sunk my business. Do you even understand what that would have done to me? People were looking now. Guests paused, glancing toward us from the buffet, the terrace, the open bar. And just as Mom reached for her default response, the smile, the fake laugh, the he's just being dramatic, she saw Kara. Camera raised. Watching. Filming. Kara had taken a position just a few feet away, not intruding, not interfering, just capturing the moment. And that's when it all started to fall apart. Put that away, Mom hissed at her. Kara didn't move. I hired her, I said evenly. She's working, and I wanted her to document everything. Not just your decorations and Caleb's tie, but the real story. The one no one in this family talks about. Caleb looked like he wanted to disappear. Ryan, please. Can we talk privately? Funny, I said. Private's how this all started. I think public is better. A hush had settled over the crowd now. Someone even turned down the music. I could feel the tension coil tight, like a spring, ready to snap. But I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I just turned toward the guests, their friends, their donors, their social club elite, and raised my voice just enough to carry. Sorry to interrupt. I won't keep you. But I thought you should all know, the bride and groom have asked for financial contributions toward their celebration. And while I was apparently invited for that reason, I'd suggest caution. The last time they accessed my financial records, they didn't ask for permission. Gasps. A few murmured, "What?" from people nearby. I let it hang for a second. Then I turned back to my mother. You've spent years pretending I don't exist, laughing about my business, using me when it's convenient, tossing me aside when it's not. And now, when your favorite son commits a crime, you protect him. You cover it up. But not anymore. She tried to recover. This is ridiculous. You're making a scene at your brother's engagement. No, I cut in. You made the scene. You just didn't expect the camera to be pointed at you. I turned and walked away before she could speak again. Not rushed. Not storming off. Just done. Kara followed me out, still filming until we passed the valet. When I reached the end of the drive, the valet handed me my keys with a confused smile. Congratulations, he said. I smiled. Something like that. As I pulled away, I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel hurt. I felt clean. Because for the first time in my life, I hadn't just stood up to them. I had made sure they'd never be able to pretend I wasn't there again. And now? Now the fallout was just beginning. The fallout didn't explode overnight. It unraveled slowly, painfully, publicly, and piece by piece. By Monday morning, the engagement party was the only thing anyone in my mother's circle was talking about. Word spread like wildfire. A few short clips from Kara's footage had been quietly passed around their country club's Facebook group, just enough to show my mother's face frozen in that perfect mix of outrage and panic, and Caleb visibly choking on his own guilt. Kara never released anything publicly, but I didn't need her to. The mere fact that the footage existed was enough. My mother's reputation as the poised matriarch with the perfect family started to crumble at the edges. Her friends stopped calling. RSVPs to the wedding dropped off without explanation. One of the vendors pulled out a week later, citing concerns over payment. Then came the real blow. Jonathan, the forensic accountant, followed through on his end. He quietly sent a summarized report of the evidence to the board of the nonprofit where my mother volunteered, a very prestigious, very image-conscious organization she lived for. She wasn't charged with anything, of course. She hadn't committed the crime herself. But once the board saw her name tied to financial misconduct, even indirectly, they asked her to step down for the sake of optics. She didn't even get to finish the term she bragged about in every holiday card. As for Caleb, it got worse. His job offer, the big one in D.C., was rescinded. I hadn't planned for that part. I hadn't sent the report anywhere near his employer. But someone must have Googled him. Companies vet their hires more than ever now, especially when the word fraud starts floating around in family gossip circles. He was blacklisted before he ever started. No one called to offer him another opportunity. And after a few awkward updates on LinkedIn, he went silent. I heard he tried to pick up some part-time consulting work. Freelance. Nothing stuck. He sent me an email a month later. Short. 2 lines. I messed up. I know. I'm sorry. Please don't destroy what's left. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. He had already done that himself. And my parents? Well, after a few half-hearted attempts to patch things up, a forwarded meme from my dad, a birthday card from my mom signed love, always, they finally seemed to understand the truth. I wasn't coming back. Not to the holidays. Not to family dinners. Not to pick up the broken fan in the den. They'd burned the bridge, and for once, I didn't rush in with a fire extinguisher. Instead, I built something on the other side. Business boomed. New clients rolled in every week. People respected me, not because of my last name or my college degree, but because I did honest, good work. I hired 2 more employees, started mentoring local trade students, and even bought my own house on a quiet street with a wraparound porch and space for a garden. And on that porch, just last week, I got a letter in the mail. White envelope. Handwritten address. No return label. Inside, an invitation. Caleb and Natalie's wedding. I looked at it for a long time. Then I walked it out back, lit a match, and let it burn to ash in the fire pit. No drama. No speeches. Just closure. Because sometimes, revenge isn't loud. It isn't flashy. It's not about tearing someone down. It's about rising so high above the people who hurt you that they have no choice but to look up and finally see what they lost. And I promise you this. They saw. I still remember the way the nurse looked at me when she walked into the empty waiting room that morning. Pity mixed with confusion, the kind of look you give someone when something's obviously wrong but you don't know if you're allowed to ask. My daughter, Emma, was having surgery, nothing life-threatening, thank God, but serious enough that she'd be recovering for weeks. She's 6, bright as the sun and brave as anything. She'd fallen and torn a ligament in her arm that required a delicate reconstruction. The type of surgery that terrifies a parent, even if the doctor says it's routine. We'd been preparing for weeks, explaining things to her gently, arranging her favorite snacks, making sure her stuffed giraffe, Marvin, came along for emotional backup. I thought at least one person from my family would show. Just one. I'm Jordan, by the way, 33. Single dad since I was 27. Emma's mom walked out when she was just a baby. No dramatic cheating scandal or big courtroom fight. Just a slow disappearance. One day she said she wasn't meant to be a mother, packed up, and never looked back. I was terrified and completely unprepared, but from the moment I held that little bundle in my arms, crying like the world had ended, I knew I'd figure it out. And I did. My life isn't glamorous. I work IT support for a law firm and do a little freelance troubleshooting on the side, but it's stable. Emma and I have our routines, our inside jokes, our movie nights, and pancake Sundays. It's not flashy, but it's ours. And I thought my family, my parents and my younger brother, Caleb, understood that. That they respected what I'd built with what little I had. I was wrong. It started off small, as these things do. Subtle stuff. Like how my mom would constantly tell me that Emma needs a woman's influence, or that she feels sorry for her, growing up in a broken home. She never said it cruelly, just in that tight-lipped, polite way that moms can twist the knife without raising their voice. My dad was more detached. He'd say things like, "You're doing your best," in a tone that made it sound like I was some overambitious child, not an actual parent doing all the work. Caleb didn't really engage with Emma at all. He'd show up for holidays, toss her a present with the tag still on, and then spend the rest of the time talking about his latest business idea. He's 29, self-proclaimed entrepreneur, and still living in the guest house behind my parents' home. Last year it was a crypto startup, before that it was drop-shipping watches, and this year, apparently, it was luxury dog accessories. Every scheme somehow involved asking for money, and he always got it. I, on the other hand, learned early that if I needed help, I'd better have a spreadsheet, a PowerPoint, and a full list of repayment terms. I didn't borrow often, but when Emma had to get a dental procedure 2 years ago and I came up short after an emergency plumbing disaster, I asked my parents for $800 to bridge the gap. My dad made me sign a formal loan agreement. 5% interest, payable in 6 months. I paid it off in 4, and they still bring it up. But I never pushed back. I thought maybe they just didn't get it. Maybe it was generational. Or maybe, if I was being really honest with myself, I just wanted to keep the peace. Emma adored her grandparents, even if their affection came with occasional passive aggression, and I didn't want her growing up feeling like she had no extended family. I told myself that as long as they weren't cruel, I could bite my tongue. Then came the surgery. We'd known the date for weeks. I'd texted the family group chat. I'd reminded them 3 times. Emma's surgery is on the 11th. She's a little nervous, but being super brave. If you're able to stop by the hospital or send her a card, I know it would mean the world to her. Not a single response. Not even a thumbs up. I tried to give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they were busy. Maybe they'd surprise her afterward with balloons or something cheesy like they used to when we were kids. I even told Emma the night before, "You might see Grandma and Grandpa tomorrow. Maybe even Uncle Caleb." She smiled so wide her missing front teeth made her look like a jack-o'-lantern. "I hope Grandpa brings jelly beans," she said. "He always eats them all, but I think that's funny." But no one came. The surgery went fine. The doctor said she did great. I sat there in that cold plastic chair for 6 hours, alternating between watching reruns on my phone and staring out the window pretending I wasn't angry. Emma woke up groggy, clutching Marvin and asking for apple juice. When we got home, I kept expecting something to show up. A call, a text, even a card. Nothing. 3 days later, I got the text from my dad. It buzzed in while I was cooking dinner. Emma was in the living room, drawing a picture of a lion holding an ice cream cone. I flipped the phone over without thinking, but the preview caught my eye. "Can you send $4,000 for your brother's wedding suit?" I stared at it for a full minute, trying to make sense of what I was reading. Caleb wasn't even engaged last I heard. Now he needed a $4,000 suit? I opened the message and read it twice, just to be sure. "Hey Jordan, I hope Emma is feeling better. Caleb's wedding is coming up fast, and he wants a designer suit. We told him we'd help, but it's been tight this month. Can you cover the $4,000, and we'll settle up later?" No apology for missing the surgery. No explanation. Just this. I didn't respond right away. I didn't even get mad. Not yet. Instead, I put my phone down, finished making dinner, and sat with Emma while she told me about the lion's magical powers. I listened. I nodded. I smiled. Then, once she was asleep, I went into my banking apps. For years, I'd let my parents have some access, join emergency accounts we'd set up when Emma was born, just in case. I'd even authorized them as backups on some things. I'd forgotten how much control I'd quietly handed over just for the illusion of family support. I revoked everything. Then, for good measure, I opened my Venmo and sent my dad exactly 25 cents with the note, "Buy him a tie." That should have been the end of it. But the next morning, my phone rang at 7:03 a.m. It was my mom, then my dad, then Caleb. Voicemails, texts, missed calls, and one message from my dad that made my stomach turn. "If you want to go nuclear, fine. But don't say we didn't try. You've made your choice. Just remember who helped raise you." I hadn't even started yet. But I knew, right then, that I was going to. Not out of spite. Out of principle. Because if they thought they could pretend Emma didn't matter, if they thought they could keep using me while ignoring my daughter, they were about to learn what happens when a quiet single dad finally snaps. The voicemail started innocent enough. "Hey sweetie, just wanted to check in," my mom's voice said, all breathy concern. "Your father said something about a Venmo joke? Caleb's feeling a little hurt. Call us back, okay?" It would have been funny if it weren't so calculated. Like they wanted me to feel like the crazy one. Like I had overreacted. By noon that same day, the tone had shifted. My dad left a message that was short and clipped. "Don't know what kind of games you're playing, Jordan, But this isn't how family behaves. That one stayed with me. Not because of the words, but because of how familiar they sounded. It was the same tone he used when I was a teenager and decided to apply to an out-of-state college. The one they didn't approve of. The one I ended up not attending because my financial aid got mysteriously messed up and no one ever explained how. Emma was watching Lilo and Stitch on the couch when Caleb finally called. I let it go to voicemail again. He didn't disappoint. Bro, a tie? You think you're clever? I've got fittings scheduled this week. I already told them we were doing Tom Ford. You seriously can't spot me after everything Mom and Dad have done for you. After everything they've done? I sat at the kitchen table, phone still in hand, wondering if I was losing it. Did I dream up the last 6 years of being a single dad while everyone else in my family played house and congratulated themselves for moral support? Did I hallucinate that time I asked for help with Emma's daycare deposit and got a 6-paragraph lecture on taking responsibility? I didn't respond. Not out of anger. Yet, but because I needed time to think. This wasn't just about the $4,000. It was about the way they were rewriting history in real time, spinning my silence into guilt and their entitlement into duty. That night, I poured a glass of wine and dug out the old family group chat. I scrolled back months, then years. Birthday parties missed. Last-minute cancellations. Dry one-word replies to photos of Emma's school plays or Christmas drawings. Then I found it. The message I sent last year, when Emma had her first violin recital. I'd bought her the instrument secondhand and sat through weeks of off-key screeches while she practiced. She was so proud when she got on that stage, fingers shaking, playing Twinkle, Twinkle Little Star. I invited everyone. Not a single one of them showed. But Caleb had posted on Instagram that same night, some rooftop cocktail party with a girl whose name I never learned. Blessed, the caption said. I guess it never occurred to them I'd remember these things. But I did. All of it. Still, I said nothing. Until the wedding invitations went out. That's when everything began to twist. The invitation was cream-colored, thick paper with gold embossed letters and a little wax seal. Fancy. Ridiculous. My name was printed alone. Jordan Williams plus guest. No mention of Emma. No checkbox for children. Just me. That was my tipping point. At first, I thought it was an oversight. Maybe they were trying to save on headcount. But when I called my cousin Rachel, who's notoriously blunt and has 3 kids of her own, she told me the truth. Oh, yeah? Your mom told us it's adults only. Said she doesn't want the ceremony disrupted. Disrupted? Like Emma was a barking dog or someone's phone going off. She didn't mean it that way, Rachel added quickly, sensing the silence on my end. I'm sure she was just trying to keep things elegant. You know how your mom gets. Yeah, I knew. I didn't tell Emma. I couldn't. She'd been so excited when I showed her the save the date months ago. Do I get to wear a flower dress? She'd asked, eyes wide. Can I dance with Uncle Caleb? The fact that he barely acknowledged her hadn't fazed her one bit. Instead, I RSVP'd no and said nothing to anyone. 2 weeks passed in silence. Then the manipulation began in earnest. My mom called during dinner. I didn't answer. She left a message. I know you're probably still upset. But Caleb really wants you there, Jordan. We all do. He was even asking if you'd make a speech. I told him you'd be honored. Let's not let little misunderstandings get in the way of such a special day. Little misunderstandings. I'd stayed quiet too long. That night, I texted my mom and dad both in the group thread. I was calm, polite, but I told them the truth. I won't be attending the wedding. I find it incredibly hurtful that Emma wasn't included or even acknowledged in the invitation. She's family. If that's not how you see it, then I have nothing else to contribute. I watched the 3 little dots pop up, then disappear. Nothing came through until the next morning. A single sentence from my dad. Stop making everything about your kid. I stared at it so long the screen dimmed. Everything about my kid. She wasn't some background character. She was my life. Every decision, every sacrifice, every moment since the day she was born had been for her. And now I was being told, by my own father, that she was an inconvenience. But I wasn't shocked, because it explained so much. It explained why, when Emma was born, they didn't come to the hospital for 2 days. Why, when I asked my mom to babysit once so I could go to a job interview, she said, I didn't raise my kids just to raise yours too. It explained why Caleb, who had never held a job longer than 6 months, was still treated like some golden son, while I was the difficult one just for asking for support. Why every time I pushed back, I was labeled dramatic or oversensitive? Why they expected me to be there for them, but never the other way around? This wasn't about a suit. It wasn't even about the wedding. It was about how they saw me. More than that, how they saw Emma. An afterthought. I started noticing more after that. Subtle jabs. Passive comments through other relatives. My aunt left a message one evening that was clearly meant to patch things up, but only made things worse. Honey, your parents are really hurt. They just wanted one day that wasn't about the kids. It doesn't mean they don't love Emma. Can't you just let this go? That phrase, one day that isn't about the kids, kept echoing in my head. As if most days are about the kids for them. As if they're the ones packing school lunches or sitting through dentist appointments or holding trembling little hands before surgery. Emma was my everyday, so I didn't let it go. A week before the wedding, Caleb sent me a message that was so absurd I had to reread it twice. Look, I know things have been tense, but we're family. We need to come together. You're the best man, remember? Don't make this about politics or grudges. Just show up and give the speech. Dad said he already wrote some notes for you. I didn't respond. Instead, I pulled up the file folder on my desktop labeled Estate. Inside were documents I hadn't looked at in a long time. Bank statements, authorization forms, a copy of the account that my grandfather had left to me when he passed. I'd been managing it responsibly for years. The investments were modest but smart, and until recently, my parents had full co-signing privileges in case of emergencies. Not anymore. I stared at that balance. Thought about the countless nights I'd skipped dinners to make sure Emma had what she needed. Thought about the time I gave Caleb $500 4 years ago so he wouldn't get evicted, money I never saw again. Thought about how my parents still hadn't once said, "How is Emma feeling after her surgery?" And then I made a decision. I wasn't just going to sit this wedding out. I was going to make sure they felt it. But not through yelling. Not through some angry family email. No, this was going to be strategic, thoughtful, and final. They wanted a clean, pretty wedding. They were going to get a storm. And I hadn't even started yet. I wish I could say I was surprised when the final straw came. I wasn't. Not really. Somewhere deep down, I think I always knew that my family was more invested in the appearance of love than love itself. But knowing something and seeing it, feeling it dig into your chest like a rusted nail, that's a different kind of hurt. The week before Caleb's wedding, I was trying to move on. Really, I was. I'd stopped answering their calls, cleared the group thread notifications, and poured myself into Emma's routine like nothing had happened. She had just gotten her cast off, and we were making a big deal of it, celebrating with extra ice cream, a new art set, and letting her pick the movie every night for a week. She chose Bolt 3 nights in a row, even though she cried every time the dog got lost. She said she liked the part where he found his way back anyway. I didn't miss the symbolism. Friday night rolled around, and Emma was sleeping over at her friend Layla's house, her first sleepover since the surgery. I was halfway through a late dinner and just settling into a rare moment of quiet when my phone buzzed. A message from my cousin Rachel. "Hey, I'm so sorry. I thought you knew." No context. No follow-up. Just that. I called her immediately. "Jordan," she answered, voice low, like she was hiding in a pantry. "I didn't want to be involved in this, but you need to know what they did." My stomach turned. "What happened?" She hesitated. "Your mom. She told everyone you refused to bring Emma to the wedding. That you made a big scene about not wanting her exposed to unmarried people living together. She said you called the wedding immoral." I almost dropped the phone. "What?" I could barely get the word out. "That's a lie. That's not even close to anything I said." "I know," she said quickly. "I know." But she said it in front of Aunt Marcia and Uncle Greg and like half the family. Caleb was there too. No one questioned it. I stood there in my dark kitchen, heart pounding in my ears, waiting for it to make sense. It didn't. "She said you sent that 25 cents to mock them," Rachel added, "and that you locked them out of the accounts to punish Caleb for getting married before you." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the audacity was so staggering, it short-circuited my ability to respond. "Jordan, they've rewritten the whole thing. You're the villain now. People are saying Emma's become your whole personality, that you're using her as a crutch." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. Rachel sighed. "I just didn't want you to show up to the reception and get blindsided. I thought you knew." "I'm not going," I said automatically. "I know," she said, "but you should be the one to decide that. Not them." I hung up, sat back down at the table, and stared at my half-eaten dinner. Suddenly, I wasn't hungry. I pulled up the family group chat and reread everything. My parents hadn't said a word about Emma's surgery. They hadn't apologized for skipping it. And now they were lying about me, to the whole family, to save face. They weren't just ignoring my daughter. They were erasing her. That was the moment something broke. Not in a dramatic, yelling, throwing plates kind of way. Quiet. Like a door locking. This was never going to get better. I could twist myself into knots trying to please them, trying to show up, trying to be reasonable, but they were never going to see me. Not as I was. Not as a father. Not as a person. And they were never going to see Emma as anything more than an extension of my choices. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I planned. Because if they wanted to pretend I was the villain, fine. I'd give them one. 2 days before the wedding, I got a call from my dad that I didn't expect to answer. But I did. Not out of forgiveness. Out of curiosity. "Jordan," he said, curt and distant, like he was addressing a customer and not his own son. "We need to talk." "Go ahead." There was a pause. Then, "Your behavior has been deeply disappointing. I don't know what this vendetta is about, but your mother is upset, your brother is stressed, and frankly, it's time for you to grow up." "Grow up," I repeated. "You've made everything about your daughter again. This wedding isn't about you or your child. It's about Caleb." There it was again. Your child. Not Emma. Not his granddaughter. Just a label. A burden. A mistake they had long ago decided I had made. And now they were determined to punish me for it forever. "You spread lies about me to the family," I said quietly. "You told them I refused to bring her because of some moral objection. That I locked you out of my accounts to be petty. Do you even hear yourselves?" My dad's voice didn't even flicker. "We were trying to protect you." I laughed again. That strange, hollow laugh. Protect me from what? From being a good father? From having boundaries? "We were protecting the family's reputation," he said flatly. "If people heard you refuse to attend your own brother's wedding over a child's feelings, it would sound." "A child's feelings?" I snapped. "Do you hear yourself? She's not a prop, Dad. She's not a political inconvenience. She's a human being." There was silence on the line. Then he said, "This is exactly what I'm talking about. You're hysterical. Emotional. Always have been." I hung up. I didn't trust myself not to scream. That night, Emma came home from her sleepover, bubbly and full of stories about baking cookies and staying up past bedtime. She had no idea what was brewing behind the scenes. And I wasn't going to let it touch her. Not yet. But I did tuck her in that night with an extra long hug. And after she was asleep, I opened my laptop and got to work. First, I wrote an email to the family, every cousin, aunt, and relative who had gotten that twisted version of events. It was calm, detailed, full of screenshots and receipts. I explained exactly what had happened. I included a timeline. I didn't editorialize. I let the facts speak for themselves. Then I sent a second email, this one to my lawyer. "You see, what my parents had conveniently forgotten, and what Caleb never knew, was that the trust Grandpa left me had certain protections and clauses. Clauses that my father had waved away back when I was 19 and didn't understand what they meant. Clauses about misuse. Clauses about breach of cosigner privileges. Clauses that gave me full legal right to audit every single withdrawal that had ever been made by my parents on my behalf. The account had been dormant for years, aside from some conservative investments. But not anymore. I requested a full forensic audit. And then I found something I wasn't supposed to find. A wire transfer. 2 years ago. $16,000. Labeled, Caleb, Seed Funding, Private Investment. I sat back in my chair, heart hammering. My parents had taken money from Emma's future, from the account I had guarded for years, without telling me, and given it to Caleb, to fund a dog hat company that went bankrupt 6 months later. I called the bank. They confirmed it. The authorization had been signed with my dad's co-signer status, pre-revocation. It wasn't fraud, but it was betrayal. The next day, I filed to revoke all secondary access retroactively. I wasn't sure it would hold up, but I had to try. That night, my mom showed up at my doorstep unannounced. I didn't open the door. She knocked for 5 minutes straight. Then she slid a letter under the door. Handwritten. I read it once. Then again. It wasn't an apology. It was a plea. A demand. She said the family was crumbling because of me. That Emma was making me weak. That if I didn't stop this crusade, I would be disowned, disinvited, and dishonored. Her exact word. Dishonored. Like we were in a royal court. The next morning, I woke up to find Emma sitting at the kitchen table, staring at my phone. "Daddy," she said softly, "why did Grandma post a picture of Caleb on Facebook that says the only son we're proud of?" I froze. She shouldn't have seen that. But she did. And something changed in her eyes. Something quiet. Something permanent. And that was when I knew. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for her. And war was coming. The Monday after the wedding felt still. Not in a peaceful way, but like the quiet that follows an explosion, where the air feels heavy and everything sounds just a little too distant. Emma was back at school, and I was working from home, but I couldn't focus. My inbox was full, my coffee had gone cold, and I'd read the same line of an IT troubleshooting manual 7 times before realizing I wasn't even blinking. I kept thinking about that photo, the one Emma saw on Facebook. It was just a simple image, Caleb in his wedding suit, presumably the Tom Ford the first refused to pay for, posing with our parents under a canopy of white roses. My mother wore a blue dress, my father had his usual deadpan smirk, and Caleb was grinning like he'd just won the lottery. The caption, written by my mother in that cloying tone she used for online posts, read, "Proud doesn't even begin to cover it. Our son, our light, our legacy." And then the hashtags. Hashtag best son, hashtag family first, hashtag only son we're proud of. That last one, that's the one Emma saw. I don't even remember walking to her that morning. I just remember finding her at the kitchen table, her tablet in front of her, her fingers resting on the edge like she wasn't sure if she should keep touching it. Her expression didn't match the 7-year-old I knew. No tears, no pout. Just stillness. "Why would Grandma say that?" she asked quietly, eyes not moving from the screen. I crouched down beside her. I don't know, honey," I said, trying not to let my voice crack. Sometimes people say things online that they don't mean. Or maybe they forget who's reading. But I thought they liked me. "You're amazing. Anyone who doesn't see that doesn't deserve to be in your life." She nodded like she understood. But her eyes, God, her eyes, they stayed a little too blank for my comfort. I kissed her forehead and told her to get ready for school. She obeyed, robotically. I watched her zip up her backpack without a word. It was the first time I saw her armor go up, and I hated them for it. After dropping her off, I sat in the car for 15 minutes without starting the engine, just breathing, watching the sidewalk, trying to remember how we got here. I thought back to when Emma was born, back when my parents first visited the hospital, 2 days late, after I had already spent 48 hours alone, feeding her formula and watching over her tiny body in a plastic crib. My mom had brought a balloon and a blanket, and my dad had stood at the doorway like he was checking into a motel. I remember holding Emma up to them, expecting warmth. Instead, my mother said, "She looks tired already. You're going to have to learn to sleep when she sleeps." No congratulations. No, you did it. Just advice I hadn't asked for, and a deep sigh as she looked around the room and said, "I guess this will do for now." Back then, I didn't know better. I told myself they were just overwhelmed, that they'd warm up, that time would heal it. It never did. They treated Emma like a technicality, something they tolerated because she came with me, like baggage. And now, 7 years later, they were proud to shout from the rooftops that she didn't count, that I didn't count. I hit rock bottom that week. Not just emotionally, financially too. The audit came back on Thursday. I had been holding out some hope. Maybe that wire transfer was a fluke. Maybe they hadn't touched anything else. Nope. Over $27,000 had been withdrawn from my grandfather's trust account in small increments over the course of 5 years, all under the justification of family emergencies, all signed by my father back when he still had authorization. There were no receipts, no itemizations. One $5,000 transfer was labeled simply, "Caleb's move-in support." Another was tagged as "wedding planning consultation," dated nearly 8 months before I even knew Caleb was engaged. I stared at the printout, the spreadsheet clean and damning in black and white, and I realized that everything I had clung to, my trust in them, my belief that they simply didn't understand what they were doing, had been naive. They knew exactly what they were doing. They didn't make a mistake. They made a choice. And I had been the idiot, feeding them access and information all these years like a loyal dog who kept coming back, tail wagging, even after being kicked. I went through stages of grief that night. Anger, shock, shame, rage again, but mostly exhaustion. I sat on the floor of my living room, The audit papers spread around me like confetti and cried for the first time in years. Not sobbing, not loud, just slow, painful tears that felt like they were coming from somewhere behind my ribs. Because I wasn't just grieving the money. I was grieving the illusion. I had no family anymore. Not in the way I thought. I spent the weekend avoiding calls. Rachel texted me once, saying the wedding had been nice, but weird without you. I didn't respond. I didn't check Facebook either. I didn't want to see the smiling pictures, the happy captions, the digital version of the family I used to believe I belonged to. Emma seemed to sense the change. She clung to me more that weekend, sat beside me while I worked, slept in my bed without asking, drew pictures of just the two of us, her and me, standing under a rainbow, Marvin the stuffed giraffe between us. I taped one to the fridge like it was a shield. That Sunday, something inside me finally shifted. Not toward revenge. Not yet. But toward something. A line being drawn. A realization that I couldn't just exist in limbo anymore, pretending we were taking space or letting things cool off. There was nothing left to cool. The bridge wasn't damaged. It was gone. So I started quietly preparing. I changed the password on every digital banking platform I had. I removed my name from the shared storage unit I had been helping Caleb pay for. He used it to store failed business inventory, mostly branded dog bow ties, and in used candle molds. I contacted my grandfather's estate lawyer, not just to report the misuse of funds, but to begin the process of transferring the account entirely under Emma's name, with a trust clause she could access when she turned 18. I updated my will. I updated hers. And then, slowly, I began documenting everything. The messages, the voicemails, the withdrawals, the false claims on social media. Because if they ever tried to challenge me again, legally, financially, socially, I wasn't going to be caught unprepared. They taught me that. They trained me, really. And now? Now they were going to see what it looked like when the son they underestimated got serious. But before any grand revenge could unfold, I had to sit with the weight of it all. I had to face the loneliness. Because make no mistake, it was lonely. When your parents turn on you. When your sibling becomes a stranger. When the people who are supposed to love you, who held you as a baby, who watched you grow, look at your child and see a mistake instead of a miracle. That kind of loneliness cuts deep. I didn't tell Emma the full story. Not yet. She was too young. But I did start saying no when she asked about going to grandma's. And when she asked why, I just said, because you deserve better, sweetheart. And sometimes that means walking away. She nodded like she understood. And I think in her own quiet, 7-year-old way she did. And that's when I started getting stronger. That's when the storm started to turn. Not because I wanted revenge, but because they'd left me no choice. They called it dishonor. I was about to show them what honor actually looked like. For the first time in years, my phone was silent. No buzz from my mom sending Emma a passive-aggressive Bible quote. No late-night call from Caleb asking for a quick transfer that he always forgot to pay back. No family group chat filled with recipes and baby shower photos I wasn't invited to. Just silence. It was eerie at first. Lonely, even. But then something happened. I started to breathe. Not shallowly. Not like I was constantly bracing for impact. I mean really breathe. Long, full exhales that reached all the way down into my chest. The kind I hadn't realized I'd been holding in for years. Walking away from my family hurt. I won't pretend it didn't. But in that space where their noise used to be, I started to hear something else. Myself. And I was furious, but focused. It was Monday morning when I got the call from the bank's legal compliance officer. She confirmed the audit findings and scheduled a follow-up meeting to discuss next steps. Technically, she said, you're within your rights to pursue a formal restitution claim, especially given the violation of the trust's intended purpose. I didn't say yes. Not yet. Because part of me, some fragile part still clinging to the old Jordan, wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt one last time. Maybe they'd return the money quietly. Maybe they'd apologize. Maybe they'd finally recognize how far they'd crossed the line. They didn't. In fact, that same day, my father posted a photo of Caleb on LinkedIn, posing in his custom suit with the caption, "Proud to watch my son step into the next chapter. Marriage, business, legacy. A man who honors family, works hard, and deserves everything coming to him. Hashtag family first, hashtag leadership, hashtag generational success." Legacy. That word hit differently now. Because for the first time, I realized I was someone's legacy too. Emma's. And she deserved better than this narrative my family kept trying to write over us. So I did something I hadn't done in a long, long time. I invested in myself. Literally. I took a small portion of my freelance earnings and opened a separate investment account in Emma's name, completely disconnected from the trust my grandfather left. It wasn't much to start, just a few thousand. But it was hers. Truly hers. No cosigners. No access. No backdoors. Just a seed. And then I did more. I'd always done freelance IT work on the side, mostly fixing home networks and setting up email clients for people too busy or too old to care about tech. But I'd never marketed it. Never really leaned in. That changed fast. I bought a domain. Built a sleek one-page site. Paid a graphic designer to create a logo. A stylized giraffe holding a laptop in honor of Marvin, Emma's stuffed animal and loyal mascot. The tagline read, "Smart support for real life." And then, quietly, without making a big deal of it, I launched. At first, nothing happened. A few clicks. One request to fix a printer jam from a nice woman named Cheryl. But then Rachel, my cousin, the only one who had warned me about the lies, shared the link on her Facebook. And her husband shared it. And then a lawyer he worked with needed help migrating a firm's servers to the cloud. That project alone paid my rent for 2 months. Momentum. That's what it felt like. And once it started, it didn't stop. I began blocking off one night a week to handle side clients after Emma went to bed. It was exhausting at times, but it was mine. Every invoice. Every thank you email. Every dollar. Mine. 3 months later, I'd double my freelance income. 5 months later, I was making more than my full-time job. I didn't quit right away. I wanted stability, benefits. But I talked to HR, restructured my hours, and negotiated a remote hybrid position that gave me 2 days a week entirely for my own clients. And on those days, I thrived. I wasn't just working. I was building. At home, Emma started to notice the changes too. She'd walk in after school and say, "Did you have a good client today?" And I'd show her the silly giraffe logo on my screen. She started drawing variations. Giraffe in a cape, giraffe drinking coffee, giraffe sitting on a stack of books. We made one of them into a sticker and put it on her backpack. She called it our secret team. I smiled so much it hurt. It wasn't just the business, either. Things at school improved. Emma joined the music club. I volunteered to help set up the parent-teacher portal, and the principal asked if I'd consider helping out part-time with tech support. It wasn't a big job, but it put me on their radar. People started seeing me again, not just as a guy with baggage or a struggling single dad, but as someone competent, reliable, capable. That summer, Emma and I took our first vacation. It wasn't fancy. We rented a cabin by the lake and brought board games, marshmallows, and bug spray. But it was ours. Just the two of us, fishing off the dock and watching stars blink awake while crickets chirped in the tall grass. One night, as we were roasting marshmallows, Emma looked at me and asked, "Do you think Grandma still doesn't like me?" I froze. The question came out of nowhere. I thought carefully before I spoke. I think Grandma has a lot of stuff inside her that she hasn't dealt with. And sometimes people like that hurt others, even when they don't mean to. Emma nodded slowly. I used to think it was my fault. It's not. Not even a little. She stared into the fire. Okay, I don't think I want to visit her anymore. And just like that, she let it go. Better than I ever could. When we got home from that trip, something felt different. Cleaner. Quieter. Like the chapter had ended. But of course, life has a way of circling back when you least expect it. One afternoon in September, I got an email from a name I hadn't seen in years. Mr. Callahan, my grandfather's old attorney. Subject, request for mediation. Inside was a short, formal note. Mr. Williams, I have been contacted by your father, Robert Williams, regarding a dispute over the terms and management of your grandfather's family trust. He has requested a mediation session before formal legal steps are taken. Please advise on your availability. I stared at the screen for a long time. So that was their next move. Not an apology. Not repayment. A challenge. It was almost impressive. But what they didn't realize was, I wasn't the same person anymore. They were expecting the old Jordan. The one who folded. The one who begged to be loved. They weren't ready for this version. The one who had nothing to lose and everything to protect. I clicked reply. Typed 4 words. Let's schedule it. Soon. And for the first time in my entire life, I smiled while facing a fight. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about legacy. Mine. Emma's. And I was ready to claim it. The mediation was scheduled for a Thursday morning in early October. 9 a.m. sharp. Downtown. Neutral ground. Mr. Callahan's office hadn't changed in over a decade. Same dark mahogany paneling. Same oversized green banker's lamp on the corner of his desk. Same wall clock that ticked just a little too loud. I remembered being 17 the first time I sat in that office. My grandfather had brought me there, just the two of us. I was in a wrinkled hoodie, slouched in a leather chair, pretending not to care. He talked about the future, about responsibility, about protecting what mattered. At the time, I didn't get it. I thought he was talking about money. He wasn't. That memory stayed with me as I walked into the room. Mr. Callahan stood to greet me with a warm, worn-out smile. "Jordan, thank you for coming." "Of course," I said, shaking his hand. Then I turned to see my parents already seated on the other side of the long walnut table. My mother's lips pressed into a flat, polite smile. My father didn't even try. He leaned back in his chair with his arms crossed, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. They hadn't seen me in nearly a year. No visit. No birthday card for Emma. Not even a text. And yet here they were, acting like I was the one who needed to explain himself. I took my seat, opened my folder, laid out the audit documents with quiet precision. Mr. Callahan cleared his throat. "Let's begin." It started civil. They always do. My parents were deeply concerned about the handling of the trust. They regretted any past misunderstandings. They believed family resources should be shared. They threw around words like intent, family equity, and mutual respect. But the more they spoke, the more it became clear what this was really about. They wanted access again. The trust account, though diminished by their previous withdrawals, was still valuable. The investments had performed well. The fund was projected to grow significantly in the next 5 years, especially if left untouched. My father leaned in, finally dropping the pretense. "Let's be honest," he said flatly. "That money wasn't meant for you to hoard. Your grandfather wanted to uplift the family. That includes your brother." I didn't flinch. "My grandfather left me that money. In my name. With very specific clauses. Which we helped manage when you were too young to understand," my mother chimed in. "You didn't even read the original trust letter. We made sure it was handled correctly." That's when it happened. The setup. The turning point. Mr. Callahan, who had been silent up until now, reached into his file drawer and pulled out a worn brown envelope. "Actually, he did read it," he said calmly. "Jordan requested the full original document and the handwritten letter 3 months ago. I sent him both." He slid a copy across the table. I watched my parents' faces change in real time. They didn't know. They had been banking on the assumption that I never saw the original letter, the one my grandfather wrote by hand, outlining his intentions for the trust. Not the legal jargon, but the real message. The heart of it. My mother's hand twitched. My father's jaw flexed. I spoke slowly, clearly. "I know exactly what Grandpa wanted. He left this trust to me, not just for financial security, but because he believed I would be a good steward of his values. He wrote that, in his own words, to Jordan, who I trust will use this not only to build a future for himself, but to protect those who come after him." I let the silence hang. "Emma," I added quietly. He meant Emma. My father looked like he wanted to object. My mother started to say something, but Callahan raised a hand. "I've reviewed everything," he said. "And legally, the trust now falls entirely under Jordan's management. His revocation of co-signer rights is valid, and retroactive penalties for unauthorized withdrawals can be pursued, should he wish to escalate." More silence. Then my mother, trying to salvage ground. "You're really going to hold this over our heads? We're your parents. We were just trying to support Caleb." I stared at her. "You didn't come to your granddaughter's surgery." My father scoffed. "She was getting her arm fixed. Not heart surgery. She was 6. Scared. And she kept asking where her grandparents were." My voice didn't rise. I didn't need to yell. "You were too busy planning a wedding. For a man you gave thousands of dollars to from a fund that wasn't yours." My mother's eyes filled with something. Guilt. Maybe, or maybe just embarrassment at being called out. But I wasn't finished. "This isn't about the money," I said. "It's about trust. You didn't just take from me. You took from her. And now you're here pretending you did it out of love." I looked to Callahan. "We're done here." He nodded. "Understood." My parents started to speak, but I stood and gathered my papers. Then I paused, turned to them. "I'm not going to sue," I said. Not because you don't deserve it, but because I've already won. My father frowned. Won what exactly? I smiled. Freedom. And then I left. That should have been the end of it. But fate had one more card to play. 2 weeks later, I got an email from a local small business grant foundation. I had applied on a whim. A friend of a client had forwarded me the link, and I submitted my application half asleep one night after Emma had finally gone down. I'd forgotten all about it. The email subject line said, "Congratulations. I had won a $15,000 small business grant to help expand my tech services into underfunded schools and community centers." It came with local press coverage, a photo shoot, a short feature in the city newsletter. Emma was there for the picture, holding Marvin and grinning beside me while I stood with a giant check like I'd just won the lottery. The next day, the article went live. With it, my name, my business, my story, and suddenly my inbox exploded. Clients, partnerships, requests from schools I didn't even know existed. One of them even came from our old district, the one where Caleb and I went to school, the one where my mother still volunteered. I accepted, and I made sure the press release mentioned my daughter by name. Jordan Williams, founder of Smart Support for Real Life, credits his daughter Emma as the inspiration behind his business. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. But it was a warning shot. I was visible now. Respected. No longer the quiet brother in the background. No longer the one who begged for scraps. I was a provider, a father, a leader. And the best part? I hadn't even started on the real revenge. That was still coming. And when it landed, it would change everything. They say revenge is best served cold. I disagree. It's best served quietly, with a smile, with precision, and with no need to explain yourself to the people who once made you beg for the bare minimum. By the time winter rolled in, everything was in motion. The business was thriving. What started as a few IT calls and side gigs had evolved into something real, something sustainable. Smart Support for Real Life had landed its 5th school district contract by early November. Emma and I started calling them missions. Each new school was a fortress we were rebuilding, one dusty server room at a time. She'd draw little maps with treasure chests and red XS and tape them to my office wall. Every mission brought new visibility. Every feature story, client testimonial, and parent referral built momentum. I was no longer someone's afterthought. I was someone's solution. But as my world expanded, my parents' grip tightened, at least in the ways they thought they still had leverage. They stopped reaching out directly after the mediation, but I'd catch glimpses of their pettiness in the family's outer orbit. Subtle things. A cousin would cancel a coffee meetup last minute with a vague, "Your mom's not happy about us seeing you." A holiday invitation would be accidentally lost in the mail. Someone unfriended me online for reasons they wouldn't explain. It was a quiet exile. But they forgot one thing. They'd built their social currency on appearances. And I now had access to the one thing they valued more than their pride: perception. And so, I began the setup. Not loudly. Not vindicatively. Just surgically. Step 1, the scholarship fund. The first real strike came under the guise of generosity. I took a portion of the business grant I'd received, along with some savings I'd been building, and started a micro-scholarship program in my grandfather's name. The William Harris Tech Pathways Fund. A modest award, $1,000 apiece, for underprivileged high school students pursuing IT or computer science careers. It was a tribute to the man who had actually believed in me. The one person in my family who had seen Emma as a continuation of his legacy, not a mistake. But the best part? I launched the fund with a press conference at the community center my parents used to serve on the board of. Used to. They'd quietly stepped back in recent years, but they still bragged about their service whenever convenient. I made sure the flyer for the event went out to all former board members. I made sure the photo of me and Emma, her holding up a certificate, me holding the mic, was published in the local paper. I made sure the tagline printed under the photo read, "Harris legacy continues through grandson and great-granddaughter." Not a single mention of my parents. I didn't have to say a word. The silence did all the work for me. Step 2, Caleb's cracks. It took longer than I expected, but eventually, the cracks in Caleb's image began to show. Rachel, bless her soul, kept me in the loop. She didn't even have to dig. It just started unraveling on its own. Apparently, Caleb's luxury pet brand was failing again. The influencers he paid to promote his designer chew toys had stopped posting. One of his vendors had accused him of late payments. His new wife. Yes, they'd married in a high-production blur of drone footage and rented chandeliers, had posted cryptic Instagram stories about people who pretend to be CEOs but can't balance a checkbook. The most telling part? My parents had gone radio silent. They didn't brag about him anymore. Didn't repost his business updates. The hashtag proud parent hashtags disappeared. And one night, Rachel sent me a screenshot from a community Facebook group. ISO affordable IT help for my small business. My usual guy isn't available. Any recommendations? Posted by Caleb Williams. I stared at it for a full minute. Then I sent her a message. Don't tag me. Let him sit in it. And I moved on. Because while he was posting vague desperation and watching his reputation slowly collapse, I had already laid the groundwork for the next phase. Step 3. The gala. The community gala had always been my mother's crown jewel. Every year, she'd share the silent auction and talk about how much she gave back to the neighborhood. It wasn't charity. It was theater. Well, this year, the committee had been reshuffled. New blood, new energy. And guess who had been asked to co-sponsor the event after helping 3 local schools modernize their systems? That's right, me. Smart Support for Real Life became a premier sponsor, with my name printed on the invitations and banners, right beneath the school district seal. Emma even designed a version of the giraffe logo wearing a bow tie for the occasion. When the program brochure went to print, I saw the final list of donors. My parents weren't on it. Neither was Caleb. They'd been replaced. Erased, even. And I didn't do it maliciously. I simply showed up where they had stopped showing up. I earned what they had coasted on for years. The night of the gala, I wore the same navy blazer I'd worn to Emma's kindergarten graduation. Nothing flashy. Just sharp. Confident. Emma wore a sparkly dress she picked out herself and introduced herself as Chief Creative Officer of the business. Everyone laughed, but they remembered her name. When they asked about my parents, I smiled and said, "We've taken different paths, but I'm thankful for the foundation my grandfather gave me. It was neutral, it was graceful, and it burned." Because 3 people texted me the next day asking if my parents had been disinvited from the gala. I didn't answer. Let the silence say it for me. Step 4. The audit letter. This one was for me. I hired a private accountant to produce a full legal report of the unauthorized withdrawals from my grandfather's trust. Not just the total amounts, not just the timelines, but the long-term cost of what had been lost. What those funds could have become had they not been drained to prop up Caleb's failed endeavors. Then I printed it, bound it, and mailed a copy to my parents' address. No note, no threat, just the facts. Numbers don't beg, they expose. Step 5. Emma's moment. This was the moment I knew I'd won. Not because my parents were humiliated, not because Caleb's business crumbled, but because Emma, my Emma, stood on stage at her school's winter showcase, violin in hand, and introduced her solo piece to a packed auditorium. She said, clearly and proudly, "This is for my dad. He always shows up. Every time." And then she played. I cried the whole way through. After the performance, parents came up to shake my hand. Teachers asked if I'd consider helping with their other campuses. A school board member told me I was exactly the kind of partner they hoped to find. In the back of the auditorium, I saw a familiar figure slip in late. My mother. No makeup. Eyes tired. She watched for maybe 5 minutes. Then she slipped out again. Didn't say a word. Didn't approach us. Didn't clap. But I saw her. And I knew. She saw us, too. She saw what she lost. She saw what she'd thrown away in pursuit of appearances and golden child delusions. And that was the real revenge. No screaming. No lawsuits. Just a life so full, so honest, so clearly thriving, that there was nothing left for her to do but watch it from the outside. Because we weren't part of her story anymore. We were building our own. I didn't hear from my parents again until March. It came in the form of a letter. Not an email. Not a voicemail. A letter. Handwritten, in my mother's slanted, too neat handwriting that always reminded me of old recipe cards and passive-aggressive Christmas cards from her friends. It arrived folded in thirds inside a cream-colored envelope, unmarked except for my name and address. No return address. I stood in my kitchen for nearly 5 minutes before opening it, just staring at the envelope, my mind racing through possibilities, apology, guilt, accusations. When I finally opened it, it was exactly what I expected. And yet, somehow still worse. "Jordan, I hope this letter finds you well. Your father and I have had time to reflect on everything that's happened over the past year. We've read the news articles, seen the photos, and heard about your work. While we don't agree with the way things were handled, we want to acknowledge that you've done well for yourself and Emma. We do, however, feel that this prolonged estrangement is unhealthy for everyone. It sets a dangerous example for Emma, teaching her to hold grudges and punish people rather than understand them. She deserves a full family, not just a father with a chip on his shoulder. Your brother has been struggling. His business folded, and he and Melanie have separated. He moved back into the guest house for now. He could use support from you, from his only sibling. Family means stepping up, not walking away. We're not asking for much. Just dinner, a chance to talk, to clear the air. If you're willing to move forward, we are too. Think about it. Mom, no signature from my father. No love. No mention of the money they stole, the lies they spread, the public erasure of Emma's existence. Just a performance. A last-ditch attempt to reassert control, to frame me as the problem, the grudge holder, the one preventing the family from healing. I read the letter twice. Then I fed it into the shredder. Not out of anger, out of clarity, because I finally saw it for what it was. A pattern. They hadn't changed. They never would. They'd been waiting for me to fail, waiting for me to come crawling back, waiting for the world to put me in my place so they could welcome me home like prodigal parents. But I hadn't failed. I had flourished, and they didn't know what to do with that. Emma came home from school later that afternoon, kicking off her shoes and tossing her backpack on the couch. She'd just made the honor roll for the second time in a row. I'd framed her certificate and hung it on the wall beside her artwork. "Can I have grilled cheese tonight?" she asked, flopping onto the carpet with Marvin tucked under her arm. "Grilled cheese it is." She paused. "Did Grandma write back?" I hesitated. "She did, but it wasn't really about you. Or us." She tilted her head. "Did she say she was sorry?" "No." Emma picked at a loose thread on Marvin's leg. "That's okay," she said. "I don't think I need her to anymore." And just like that, it was over. Not with a fight. Not with a final confrontation. Just a simple decision. We were done. We moved on. That spring, Smart Support for Real Life opened its first physical office, a small but sleek corner suite in a refurbished downtown building. The city awarded us a Community Tech Innovation Grant. Emma cut the ribbon at the opening ceremony while local kids lined up for free tech demos. I hired 2 part-time employees. One of them was a single dad like me. We set up a rotating childcare corner in the office, complete with puzzles, snacks, and a second-hand switch. Every photo we took, every article we were featured in, every newsletter we published listed our values at the top. Family first. People-powered. Legacy-minded. We meant every word. I saw Rachel again at a local networking event. She pulled me into a hug and whispered, "They're still talking about you like you've disappeared. Like you're bitter." I smiled. "I haven't disappeared," I said. "I just stopped performing for people who didn't want to see me." Caleb emailed me 2 months later. A single line. "Any chance you'd consider a loan? Just need to get back on my feet." I didn't respond. Not because I was cruel, but because he needed to learn what standing really meant. And me? I had too many people depending on me now. Too many missions. Too much life to build. Too much joy to protect. On Father's Day, Emma made me a card with crayon drawings of our house, our office, and a giraffe flying a rocket ship. Inside, she'd written, "Thank you for always showing up. I love our team." I kept it in my wallet. That was the only legacy I needed. And the next time someone asked me what happened to my family, I just told them the truth. They taught me everything I needed to know, by showing me exactly what not to become. If you've ever walked into a room and instantly known you didn't belong, not because of anything you did, but because of the way people looked at you like you were an uninvited guest at your own life, then you'll understand exactly how I felt that night. My name's Chase. I'm 33, and I'm the guy who showed up to his little sister's engagement party wearing a $6 hoodie and catching side eyes like I'd just tracked mud across a white carpet. But let me rewind a bit, because this story doesn't start at the party. It starts with a family that forgot who I was, and a fiancé who really should have kept his mouth shut. I was always the quiet one in the family. Not shy, just observant. I learned early that when you have 2 parents who value appearances more than substance, and a younger sister who could do no wrong, it's easier to keep your head down and work on your own goals than fight for attention that always feels conditional. My parents, Deborah and Alan, weren't bad people per se, just deeply invested in what other people thought. To them, success looked like Instagram-perfect vacations, curated brunches, and polite kids with private school educations. So when I told them I wasn't going to college but instead wanted to work on a little tech startup I was building in my room, they patted me on the shoulder and said, "It's good to dream, Chase. Just make sure you're being realistic." That was over a decade ago. Fast forward to now, and they still think I'm a little lost, maybe even a bit pitiful. That's partly my fault. I stopped trying to explain what I do years ago. I never corrected their assumptions that I was freelancing or figuring it out. I let them believe I lived in a modest shared apartment downtown because I couldn't afford better, when the truth was, I owned the building. I didn't drive a flashy car. I didn't wear designer clothes. I didn't flash money at family events. Why would I? I wasn't trying to prove anything. Or maybe, deep down, I just wanted to see who they were when they thought I had nothing. My sister, Ivy, is the golden child. Always has been. If I brought home a B+ in high school, it was, "Chase, you can do better." If she got a B-, it was, well, that subject's just not her strength. She's 4 years younger than me and has the kind of personality that draws people in, bubbly, fashionable, and just oblivious enough to get away with saying things that would sound arrogant coming from anyone else. I don't dislike Ivy. Not really. But she's never truly seen me. She talks at me, not to me. And lately, ever since she got engaged to this guy named Logan, it's like the distance between us has turned into a canyon. Logan is something else. Picture every finance bro stereotype you've ever seen rolled into one tall, smug package. Perfect hair, fake laugh, and a handshake that's just a little too firm, like he's trying to assert dominance during brunch. We've only met a handful of times, and every interaction ends with me feeling like I need a shower. The first time we met, he looked me up and down like I was a delivery guy who accidentally wandered into the dining room. He asked what I do for fun, with that polite edge people use when they don't really care about your answer. When Ivy chimed in with, "Chase is still working on his app stuff," Logan's eyebrows raised slightly, and he nodded like I was a high schooler learning to code on weekends. I didn't correct her, or him. So when I got the invitation to Ivy's engagement party, I knew what to expect. It wasn't really for me. It was for show. Ivy and Logan were throwing it at a vineyard just outside the city, one of those places with white tablecloths and fairy lights wrapped around olive trees. The invite said cocktail attire, which, in my family, means spend at least $300 or risk being talked about behind your back. I showed up in jeans, sneakers, and that $6 hoodie I picked up on sale as a joke. Not to make a statement. Not to rebel. Just because I felt like it. And maybe, yeah, a little part of me wanted to see what would happen. The moment I stepped into the main courtyard, I felt it. Heads turned. Conversations slowed. My mom blinked twice when she saw me, then forced a tight smile like she was bracing herself for someone else to notice. My dad gave me a nod from across the patio, then quickly resumed laughing with a group of Logan's uncles. But it was Logan who sealed the moment. He strolled over, wine glass in hand, his suit perfectly tailored like he'd been dipped in money. He looked me up and down, again with that scanning gaze, and grinned. "Did you Uber here, Chase?" he asked, loud enough that two of Ivy's friends turned their heads. I smiled, nodded once, and shrugged. Something like that. He chuckled, the kind of laugh that's meant to be shared, like a joke at someone's expense. "Well, hey, good to see you, man. Ivy'll be thrilled you made it." Then he gave me a pat on the shoulder, like he was being generous with his time, and sauntered off. I stood there for a moment, just taking it in. The way everyone around me looked so polished, so performative. Ivy's friends were posing for group selfies. My mom was explaining the food to someone like she'd planned the menu herself. And there I was, the brother in the cheap hoodie, with wine I didn't really want in a place I didn't feel welcome. But I didn't leave. I stayed. I made small talk. I smiled when people asked about my work and let them fill in the blanks with whatever assumptions they wanted. I let my aunt suggest that maybe I could help out with Ivy's wedding website, since I'm so good with computers. I didn't correct her either. Not that night. Because I knew something no one else in that courtyard knew. Something Logan, with his smirk and condescending tone, was about to find out in the most delicious way possible. The next morning, Logan had a board meeting scheduled downtown. I knew this because I'd seen the calendar. Not from snooping or spying, but because his firm had just signed a 5-year lease on the 27th floor of a building I own. A building I'd personally purchased through a holding company 3 years ago. And tomorrow, I was going to be sitting at the head of that conference table, not as a guest, not as a silent investor, but as the founder of the tech firm that had just acquired a 35% stake in his company's latest venture. But of course, he didn't know that yet. And that made what came next all the more satisfying. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was upset, but because my mind wouldn't stop replaying the way Logan said it. Did you Uber here? The tone was so casual, so harmless on the surface. But underneath, it was a jab. A public jab. A subtle way of telling everyone, hey, this guy doesn't belong here. And what made it worse wasn't that he said it, but that nobody around me blinked. No one stepped in. Not even Ivy. She was too busy soaking up the attention, fluttering between wine tables and hugging people she hadn't seen since college. But that's always how it's been. Ivy shines, and everyone else fades into the background. Even me. I got back to my place around midnight, sat on the edge of my bed, and pulled off my sneakers. I live in the top floor unit of a restored pre-war building in the heart of the city. Hardwood floors, exposed brick, floor-to-ceiling windows. Not that my family knows that. Far as they're concerned, I'm still renting a cramped walk-up with roommates and mismatched furniture. I don't show off. Not because I'm humble. I just learned a long time ago that flaunting things only fuels their weird mix of judgment and jealousy. Still, as I looked out across the skyline that night, I felt something in my chest. Not quite anger. Not quite sadness either. More like a deep ache. I'd built a life for myself that I was proud of. Quietly. Deliberately. And yet here I was, feeling like a teenager all over again. Like the kid who didn't get invited to prom, only to find out later that his sister helped plan it. The morning came too fast. I put on a clean white button-down, navy blazer, and tailored slacks. Nothing flashy, just sharp enough to command attention in a boardroom. I don't wear watches, but I slipped on the silver one my old co-founder got me when we hit our first million in revenue. It still ticks like the day he gave it to me. By 8:15, I was pulling into the underground garage of the commercial tower my real estate firm manages. The 27th floor had just been renovated. Glass-walled conference rooms, soundproof pods, a lobby barista station. Logan's company, Virion Capital, had moved in last month. The deal had been brokered by one of my holding companies, and my name never showed up on a single piece of paper. That's how I like it. Quiet leverage. I took the elevator to the executive conference room and greeted my assistant, Rachel, who had already prepped the room with coffee, printouts, and name cards. I wasn't just attending today, I was leading it. My software firm had recently partnered with Virion's new venture, a fintech platform that needed the tech infrastructure we had already built. The meeting was set to finalize a roadmap and discuss equity structuring. Logan had no idea. As the room started to fill up with suits and interns carrying tablets, I took a seat at the head of the table and sipped my coffee. Calm, steady, focused. At 9:03, Logan strolled in with his usual swagger. He was mid-laugh with one of his analysts, not even glancing toward the head of the table, until he did. And then he froze. I didn't say anything, just gave him a polite nod. Watched the confusion flicker across his face like a power outage. You could almost hear the mental gears grinding as he processed what he was seeing. He opened his mouth like he was about to say something, then closed it again. Slowly, he found his seat at the side of the table. The energy in the room shifted ever so slightly. But I'll come back to that later. Because that moment, that was just the start. The days leading up to that meeting were what really told me where I stood with my family. Let me rewind. After the engagement party, I figured I'd give Ivy a call, just to check in. Not because I wanted to, but because I felt like I should. I hadn't seen her much since she started dating Logan, and even less since they got engaged. The last real conversation we had was months ago, when I offered to help with the wedding planning, maybe cover some of the tech or booking logistics. She smiled and said, "That's sweet, but Logan has it all under control." So I called her the next day. She didn't pick up. Sent a text 20 minutes later. "Hey, busy tasting menu today. So fun last night though." No follow-up. "No, thanks for coming." "No, sorry about Logan being a tool." Just 3 exclamation marks and 2 heart emojis. That's when the messages from Mom started rolling in. "Chase, I hope you understand that Logan's humor just takes some getting used to. Don't be too sensitive. It was cocktail attire, sweetie. Maybe next time wear a sport coat. Ivy said you seemed a little distant. Try to be more engaged next time." It's her special moment. Each message felt like a little push. Not overt, just nudging me back into line. Like I was the one who had embarrassed the family. Like Logan was some kind of social barometer I had failed to meet. And then came the big one. A week after the party, I got an email from my dad. Not a call. An email. Subject line, financial assistance for Ivy's wedding. It was addressed to me, Ivy, my parents, and 2 aunts. The body of the message read like a proposal, literally. There were bullet points. A spreadsheet attached. My dad had outlined a funding plan for the wedding expenses, totaling just under $180,000. Venue, catering, custom invitations, luxury transportation for the guests, a live jazz band, and a destination honeymoon. He was asking each family unit to contribute, including me. Now look, I'm not stingy. I've helped people out. I've paid for hospital bills, tuition, even helped a buddy get his bakery off the ground. But this felt different. It wasn't an ask. It was an expectation. No one had spoken to me about it beforehand. No one asked if I could contribute. Just assumed I'd be fine covering my share, $30,000. I stared at the email for a long time. And then I did something I hadn't done in years. I replied, "Hi all. Appreciate you putting this together. A few thoughts. I wasn't aware Ivy's wedding had turned into a group-funded venture. I haven't been involved in any part of the planning and wasn't consulted about this request. I'd be happy to support in a way that feels appropriate and respectful, but $30,000 without prior discussion isn't it? If Ivy and Logan want a wedding of this scale, perhaps they should also be contributing proportionately. Best. Chase." Within hours, I got a phone call. From Mom. "Chase," she said, already exasperated. "Why did you write that email?" "Because I meant it," I said flatly. "You made us all look bad. Like we're trying to bleed you dry. Are you not?" I asked. She sighed. "This is Ivy's big moment. She deserves the best." "So did I said quietly. "But I didn't get a dime when I launched my company, or when I moved into my first place, or when I had to choose between eating dinner or paying rent. That was different," she said. "Why?" "Because you wanted to take the hard route. Ivy's doing things the right way." I didn't respond. There wasn't much to say to that. We ended the call shortly after, but I could feel the ice forming beneath the surface. Later that night, Ivy texted me. Not to apologize. Not to ask how I was. Just this. "Can you at least try to be supportive? It's not all about you, Chase." That one hit different. Not because it was harsh, but because it showed just how far gone she was. I didn't reply. Instead, I started making calls. Quiet ones. To the legal team. To my operations lead. To the people I trust most. Because if they were going to treat me like a nobody, like some hoodie-wearing outsider who didn't deserve a seat at the table, I was going to remind them that I built the table. But before I could even begin to implement what I was planning, something happened that pushed everything over the edge. Something that changed the dynamic in a way none of them could walk back from. And it all started with a dinner invitation from Logan. Logan's text came 2 days after the email debacle. It was short, casual, almost too casual. "Hey man, let's grab dinner this week. Just us. My treat." At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe he meant to send it to someone else. Or maybe Ivy or my parents had gotten in his ear and told him to smooth things over. Either way, it felt off. But part of me, some naive, buried part, thought maybe he was trying. Maybe, just maybe, he wanted to extend an olive branch, or at least clear the air before the wedding planning became a full-blown Cold War. So I said yes. He picked the place. This swanky New Age steakhouse downtown with dark lighting, $50 appetizers, and menus printed on black matte cardstock. You know the type. The kind of place that doesn't put prices next to the Wagyu and the waiter acts like you're beneath him if you don't order the chef's tasting menu. I got there 10 minutes early. Logan rolled in 20 minutes late. No apology, just a casual traffic, man. You know how it is. He was already on the phone when he sat down, laughing with someone named Carter about some deal going sideways because of a clause in the term sheet. No acknowledgement, no greeting. Just plopped into the booth and kept yapping like I was his assistant and not his guest. Eventually, he hung up and leaned back, loosening his collar like the conversation had exhausted him. "So," he said, flashing that same rehearsed grin he wore at the engagement party. "Thanks for meeting. I know things have been weird." Weird. That was one way to put it. I didn't say much. Just nodded and let him talk. "You know how families are," he continued. "Drama, egos, old stuff bubbling up. But Ivy really wants this whole thing to go smoothly. and your mom's been a little stressed." "Has she?" I said flat. He paused, studied me for a second. "Look, man, I get it. You're the older brother, and maybe you feel a little sidelined right now." I blinked. "Sidelined? Yeah. I mean, you've always kind of done your own thing, right? Not super involved. Kind of off the grid. Which is cool. Dude, seriously. But when it comes to big events like this, people notice." I felt something tighten in my jaw. People notice a lot of things. He smiled like I'd just made his point for him. "I just think," he said, leaning in conspiratorially, "maybe you could, be a little more mindful of how you show up. That hoodie at the party? Come on, man. You had to know that wasn't a great look." I stared at him. I didn't realize it was a job interview. He laughed. "No, but think of it from Ivy's perspective. Everyone's looking at photos, sharing them on socials, and then there's your hoodie in the background. It just didn't match the vibe. I wanted to walk out right then and there, but I didn't. I waited. Let him keep digging. Ivy said you're not really helping out with the wedding," he added, swirling his whiskey. "And that's fine. I know you've got your own stuff going on, but she's your sister. You only get married once." I arched an eyebrow. "Do you?" He smirked. "Hopefully." Then, just as the waiter came to take our order, Logan said something that flipped the entire night on its head. "Oh, and by the way," he said, waving off the menu without even looking at it, "I had a little chat with your dad about the wedding fund stuff. Figured I'd offer a suggestion." I set my menu down. "What kind of suggestion?" He sipped his drink, then said, "Told him I'd be willing to cover your share of the expenses, like, as a gesture. Clean slate and all. So you don't have to worry about the 30 grand. I stared at him. "Excuse me." He grinned. "Yeah. I mean, I know things have been tight for you. Ivy mentioned you're still freelancing and kind of between gigs, and I figured, why make this harder than it has to be? It's just money. No big deal." There it was. Ivy told him I was broke. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears. "You offered to pay my share?" I said slowly. "Yeah," he said, like he was proud of it. "Look, I know it might bruise your ego a little, but at the end of the day, it's just family. No need to make a scene over a few dollars." A few dollars. 30,000. Covered by the man who smirked at me like I was a delivery guy. The man who assumed I Ubered to the engagement party because clearly, someone like me couldn't afford anything nicer. I forced myself to stay calm. I smiled. Not because I was okay, but because I realized something important in that moment. They didn't just underestimate me. They had erased me. My own sister let her fiancé believe I was struggling. My parents went along with it. No one corrected the lie because it was more convenient to keep me small. Easy. Forgettable. I could have blown up right then. Could have told Logan that I owned the building his company just moved into. That I held a controlling interest in the tech his firm was about to depend on. That his entire world was about to shift, and he didn't even see it coming. But I didn't. Because the betrayal wasn't just what he said. It was what Ivy didn't. After dinner, I didn't hear from her for a week. No call. No text. Nothing. So I called her. When she picked up, she sounded distracted. "Hey, can I call you back?" In the middle of finalizing the flower arrangements. "I won't take long," I said. "Just one question." "Okay. Did you tell Logan I was broke?" There was a pause. Then a sigh. "Chase, come on. Did you?" "I didn't say broke. I just said you've been figuring things out." "Figuring things out," I repeated. "I mean, aren't you?" I clenched the phone tighter. "Why would you say that? Why would you let him think I can't afford to contribute?" "I didn't let him think anything," she snapped. "It's not like you've been super transparent. You don't even talk about what you do. That doesn't mean you get to fill in the blanks with whatever makes your life more convenient." Her voice went cold. "You're being dramatic." I laughed. "You're marrying a guy who offered to pay my share of your wedding and acted like it was charity. And you let him. He was trying to be nice." "No. He was trying to assert control. And you let him do it at my expense." She didn't answer. "That hurts, Ivy," I said. "It really does. Well, maybe if you showed up for this family once in a while, people wouldn't have to assume anything." Click. That was it. She hung up on me. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel left out. I didn't even feel angry. I felt done. But the betrayal wasn't finished yet. Not even close. 3 days later, I got an email from the wedding planner. A mass message to everyone involved in the event. The subject line made my stomach sink. "Final guest roles and rehearsal dinner itinerary." Attached was a PDF with all the updated wedding details. Seating charts. schedules, roles, photos, notes from Ivy in pink highlighter. I opened the file, scanned the first few pages, and then froze. Under wedding party, my name wasn't listed. I wasn't a groomsman. I wasn't doing a toast. I wasn't even seated at the family table. I'd been demoted to general guest seating. Table 17, right between college friends of the bride and neighbors of the groom's parents. No call, no explanation, no heads up, just quietly, efficiently, removed. I stared at the screen for what felt like an hour. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. They wanted me invisible. And that's when something shifted. Something deep. Something final. I wasn't going to play along anymore. I wasn't going to pretend this was normal, or healthy, or deserved. They had erased me from their perfect little narrative. They had rewritten who I was to fit their version of the story. And now it was time to write my own ending. But before I could begin, something else happened. Something that changed everything. It started with a phone call from one of Logan's partners. And what he told me, it flipped the entire game on its head. The phone rang just after 7 a.m. I was sitting on the patio of my place, coffee in hand, watching the city start its day through a veil of early morning haze. My mind was still spinning from that PDF, the table assignment, the way my name was buried like an afterthought, as if I were just some distant cousin they had to invite out of obligation. I hadn't spoken to Ivy since the call. I hadn't responded to the wedding planner. I hadn't told anyone in the family how much that little spreadsheet gutted me. I just sat with it, let it settle, let the silence thicken. Then came the call. Chase Everett? The voice said, smooth but cautious. This is Chase. It's Daniel from Vitech Partners. Logan passed me your contact. Said you'd be the point person on the DevOps licensing questions. That made me sit up a little straighter. DevOps licensing. Vitech. That was the back-end infrastructure deal Logan's firm was finalizing for the fintech platform they were building. And it wasn't supposed to be public knowledge that I had any direct line to those licensing conversations. At least, not yet. Sure, I said measured. How can I help? Daniel hesitated for half a second, like he was unsure how much to say. So, look, I'll just be upfront. We've been reviewing the equity splits Logan proposed last week, and there's some stuff that's not lining up. There's a clause in the joint venture agreement that names your firm as a key partner, but Logan presented it like it was a third-party vendor. External only. I frowned. That's not how it was structured. Yeah, he said quickly. That's what I figured. And then I saw the name of the holding company, Thorne and Kessler Group, and I recognized it from a different file. That's yours, right? He had done his homework. Yes, I said calmly. It is. There was a pause. Okay, so here's the thing. Logan tried to rework the contract to cut your team out of profit sharing entirely. Recast you as vendors instead of strategic partners. He claimed you missed your development deadlines and voided the clause. I blinked. That clause was never voided. And we hadn't missed a single deadline. I knew because I built the schedule. Personally, it was a lie. A paper-thin, easily refutable lie, but a lie all the same. Thanks for letting me know, I said, voice tight. I'll handle it. Daniel lowered his voice. Just be careful. I don't think he realizes who you are yet. I ended the call and stared at the skyline for a long time. The coffee in my hand had gone cold. My heart hadn't. So this is what betrayal looks like in a suit and tie. Not just humiliation at a dinner table. Not just manipulation of family dynamics. This was professional, strategic, deliberate. Logan was trying to erase me in more ways than one. First at the engagement party, then in front of my own family. And now? Now he was trying to cut me out of a deal I architected from the ground up, using my own infrastructure, my own code base, and my own money. And Ivy? She was letting him. Worse, maybe she knew. That's when I hit bottom. Not dramatic. Not cinematic. Just a slow, suffocating realization that I didn't have a sister anymore. Not really. She'd chosen someone else. Over and over again. She'd traded her brother for a polished resume and a family with connections. And I'd let her do it. I'd given her space, grace, every benefit of the doubt. I'd forgiven her for being thoughtless, for being passive, for going along with a narrative that made me the family underachiever. But this wasn't passive anymore. This was a betrayal, clear as day. And for the first time, I let myself feel it. Fully. I didn't eat that day. Couldn't. I left my phone on silent and let the texts pile up. Mom sent a link to the Airbnb she wanted me to book near the wedding venue. Cheaper than the hotel, but still decent. if that's more your style. Ivy sent a group photo from her cake tasting with the caption, "Missing you." Logan, God help me, sent a meme about groomsmen tuxes being too tight. I deleted it before I even finished reading. I felt like I was drifting. My world, the one I had built so carefully with late nights and tenacity and 1,000 uncelebrated wins, suddenly felt far away. Like it didn't matter. Because the people I wanted to be proud of me never even noticed. That night, I walked 5 miles with no destination. Just wandered downtown in a hoodie and sneakers, the same kind that got me mocked. I passed restaurants I'd invested in anonymously, bars that used my software to manage tabs, buildings that stood tall because I wrote the code that made their systems run, and not one person knew. And maybe that was the point, because I never wanted the spotlight. I just wanted to be respected, seen, understood. Instead, I was misunderstood by strangers and dismissed by my own blood. When I got home, the lights from the city pulsed like a heartbeat through the glass. I collapsed into the chair in the corner of my living room, the one no one ever sat in but me, and I stared into the dark for hours. Something broke that night. Quietly. No rage. No slamming fists or shattering glass. Just silence. And a decision. I wasn't going to fight for their approval anymore. I wasn't going to show up and smile through the disrespect. I wasn't going to pour myself into people who only saw me when I was useful or convenient. But I wasn't going to get revenge either. Not yet. Because revenge implies reacting. And I wasn't reacting anymore. I was planning. That's when I pulled out the old leather-bound notebook from the bottom drawer of my desk. The one I hadn't touched since my second startup exit. Inside were sketches, diagrams, contingency ideas. Notes I wrote to myself in moments of clarity. I flipped past pages and landed on a blank one. I wrote one word at the top. Reset. Then underlined it. And I started to write. Ideas. Steps. Levers I could pull. Not to destroy, but to remind. Because sometimes the best way to handle betrayal isn't to burn the house down. It's to own it without anyone realizing. And the first domino, the one that would shift everything, was an invitation. An invitation I wasn't supposed to see. One that wasn't sent to me directly. But I saw it anyway. Because Rachel, my assistant, who reads everything, forwarded it to my inbox that morning, with a subject line that simply said, "You'll want to see this." It was a calendar hold for an executive brunch. A private, high-level event hosted by Logan's firm, Virion Capital, designed to woo a set of angel investors and showcase their new fintech prototype. Set to take place in 2 weeks. At a venue I happen to own. I read the invitation twice, then leaned back in my chair. And for the first time in weeks, I smiled. Not because I was plotting, not yet, but because the pieces were finally on the board. And this time, I wasn't playing defense. I didn't start making moves right away. That's not how you build something that lasts. You don't win the game by flipping the board. You win by rearranging the pieces so slowly, so quietly, that by the time your opponent realizes what you're doing, they're already in checkmate. And after what they did, after Ivy cut me out of the wedding like I was a placeholder instead of a person, after Logan tried to erase me from a deal I created, after Mom had the gall to send me a budget Airbnb link like I was some broke cousin scraping together change just to show up, I wasn't just playing for a win. I was building an empire they couldn't ignore. It started small, not flashy, just a series of quiet conversations. I met with my legal team, not to sue anyone, not yet, just to review the terms of the Vitech partnership and make sure every clause, especially the ones involving revenue sharing and tech licensing, was airtight. I had structured the deal through a separate holding company years ago, partially to shield my name, partially because I liked staying in the shadows. But now I needed to bring things into the light. Then I called my DevOps team into an emergency sync, told them to double encrypt all the backend architecture, change administrative access points, and re-verify every update made in the last 30 days. Logan had already tried to push us out once. I wouldn't give him the chance to do it again. From there, I reached out to a few friends in venture capital, not to raise money, but to plant seeds. Subtle ones. I knew Logan's firm had been shopping their prototype around to a few angel funds. What he didn't know was that 2 of those funds were run by people I'd mentored 5 years ago when they were still building pitch decks in coffee shops. I didn't tell them to blacklist him. I didn't have to. All I did was explain, calmly and clearly, how the foundation of the project was built on infrastructure I owned, and how Logan had tried to cut me out without cause. That was all they needed to hear. See, In tech, reputation spreads faster than code. And while Logan looked good in a suit, VCs care about execution. They care about who built the thing, not just who pitched it. And I built the thing. At the same time, I started showing up again. Not at family events. Not yet. But in public. At fundraisers, tech summits, startup mixers. Places I used to avoid because I didn't care about clout. Now I had a reason to care. Not for me. For optics. People began whispering. Is that Chase Everett? I thought he dropped off the map. Didn't he build that predictive engine for Sequoia's portfolio modeling? I heard he owns half the valley and just doesn't talk about it. I didn't correct anyone. Let them wonder. Let the silence work for me. My personal life started to shift too. I hired a stylist. Not to look flashy, just refined. Bought 2 new suits that actually fit like armor. Upgraded my car to a matte black Audi e-tron. Sleek. Silent. Unmistakably expensive, but only if you knew what you were looking at. Like me. I moved into the penthouse unit of my building. No announcement. No look at me moment. Just quietly handed the keys to the tenant below and took the top floor. I redecorated with clean lines, dark wood, and soft lighting. Hung one piece of art, a sketch of an empty throne, on the main wall. A gift from an old friend who once told me, "You don't need a crown if you own the castle." Every morning, I worked out with a private trainer. Not to get ripped, just strong, steady, focused. Every afternoon, I met with Rachel and my strategy team to revise our roadmap. We were scaling fast, and the fintech project that Logan thought he could sideline me from, it was just one of 5 deals I had spinning now. One of 5 chessboards. He was stuck on his rook. I was already 3 moves away from queening a pawn. And then, 1 week before the executive brunch Logan was hosting, the one he had booked in my building, without realizing who signed the lease, I got a text from Ivy. "Hey, haven't heard from you in a bit. Can we talk?" It was like a ghost reaching out through the fog. I stared at the screen for a long time. We hadn't spoken since the fight. Since the "you're being dramatic" phone call. Since I found my name buried under table 17 next to a bunch of people I'd never met. But I didn't ignore her. I said simply, "Sure." When? She responded almost immediately. "Come by Mom and Dad's tomorrow? Just for a bit. No drama. Promise." I agreed. Not because I missed her. Not because I thought she deserved it. But because I needed to know. I needed to hear it from her mouth, whether she really understood what she'd done, or if she was just trying to smooth things over before the wedding. I drove to my parents' place the next evening, wearing the same hoodie from the engagement party. Let them see the version of me they thought they knew. Ivy was already there, sitting on the patio with a glass of wine, legs crossed, staring at the sky like she was trying to remember how to be soft again. "Hey," she said as I stepped out. "Hey." We sat in silence for a moment. The air smelled like rosemary and grilled chicken. Probably something Mom was cooking inside for Logan and his parents. "I messed up," Ivy said finally. I didn't respond. She looked over. "You don't have to forgive me. I just want you to know. I've been thinking about everything." "Have you?" "Yes." And I realized, I let people speak for you. I let Logan make assumptions. I let Mom and Dad shape the narrative. And I didn't push back. I looked at her. "Why?" She hesitated. "Because it was easier." There it was. The truth. She continued. "Logan's world is very curated. Everyone in it plays a part. I thought if I just slotted you in quietly, didn't make noise, things would go smoother. You made me invisible." "I know. You wanted me invisible." "No," she said quickly. "I just didn't know how to explain you. What you do. You've always been this mystery. And I thought if you just played along, it would be fine." "It wasn't fine." She nodded. "I see that now." We sat with that. For a long time. "I don't need an apology," I said eventually. "I just need to know if this is who you are now. If you're okay marrying someone who lies about deals and treats people like props." She flinched. "What happened between you two? Isn't personal." I cut in. "It's professional." And it was a move. A calculated one. He knew what he was doing. She looked away. And in that moment, I knew. She wasn't ready to confront it. Not fully. Not yet. And that was fine. Because I was done waiting for her to catch up. As I stood to leave, she said quietly, "You're not coming to the wedding, are you?" I turned back. "I haven't decided." Her eyes searched mine. "If you don't come, people will notice." "Let them." And then I left. The next morning, Rachel sent me the final guest list for the executive brunch Logan was hosting. His name was printed right under the words. Hosted by Thorne and Kessler, in partnership with Everett Tech. It was the first time Logan would see my name on the paperwork. It wouldn't be the last, because while he was still busy managing impressions and playing house with a family that applauded appearances, I was rewriting the power structure beneath his feet. And the next time we met, it wouldn't be at a dinner table. It would be at a boardroom, and I would be at the head. But that confrontation, that moment where everything would come crashing down, that was still to come. And when it did, it would change everything. I didn't sleep much the night before the brunch. Not because I was nervous, because I was wide awake, alert, focused, every gear in my mind turning with quiet precision. This wasn't revenge yet, not the satisfying kind. But I was setting the stage. And what I was about to learn in the next 48 hours would shift everything into high gear. See, there's a difference between having power and knowing when to use it. I'd spent years collecting leverage. But now, I was finally starting to understand just how much I had, and how blind Logan was to it. The executive brunch was scheduled for 10 a.m. at one of those sleek rooftop lounges with panoramic views of the skyline and furniture so modern it looked uncomfortable. Logan had chosen it months ago, thought he was being clever, thought the exposed brick and artisanal coffee carts would impress the angel investors. What he didn't realize was that the entire venue, top to bottom, was part of a property I'd acquired quietly last year through a shell company. I didn't announce it. I just sent a quick email to the venue director the day before. Please be advised that I'll be attending the brunch event at 10 a.m. tomorrow as a representative of the parent company. Full access requested. No need to inform the client. The reply came 10 minutes later. Understood, Mr. Everett. All access granted. Staff briefed accordingly. Perfect. The morning of the event, I dressed simply. Charcoal jacket, black shirt, no tie. Professional, but understated. The kind of look that made people wonder, who is that? Even if they didn't recognize you right away. I walked into the venue 30 minutes early and shook hands with the general manager. Toured the space. Made small talk with the barista. Confirmed which executive guests had RSVP'd. And that's when I saw it. The guest list. Typed. Printed. Taped to the back of the podium where Logan was set to give his speech. And halfway down the list, under VIP investor, confirmed attendance, was a name I hadn't seen in years. Peter Calhoun. My old mentor. The first man who believed in me when I was still pitching prototype apps on my cracked MacBook in a shared workspace. He'd once run one of the most respected fintech firms in the Bay. Retired at 45. Moved to Spain. Disappeared from the startup scene completely. And now, he was here. And not just attending. He was listed as the primary funder for Logan's new platform. Which meant Logan had no idea who he was dealing with. I stood there for a second, stunned. Then I did something impulsive. I pulled out my phone and texted Peter. Didn't know you were in town. We need to talk, before Logan starts pitching you lies. I didn't expect a reply, but 5 minutes later, I got one. On the roof deck. 10 minutes. We met where the wind could cut through your thoughts. Sunlight danced off glass towers around us, but Peter stood in the shade, hands in his pockets, wearing a tan blazer and sunglasses that made him look like a professor on sabbatical. He hadn't aged a day. Chase Everett, he said, turning. Of all the ghosts in this city. I smiled. Didn't expect to find you funding a guy like Logan. Peter raised an eyebrow. Didn't expect to find you in his shadow. I'm not, I said calmly. I'm the scaffolding holding up the building he thinks he built. Peter chuckled. That sounds more like the Chase I remember. I filled him in, quietly, carefully, on everything. The infrastructure, the licensing, the attempted cutout, the fake deadlines. I showed him emails, documents, Slack screenshots. The truth, layered and undeniable. He didn't interrupt, didn't blink. When I was done, he just nodded slowly and said, Then I guess we have a problem. Not if we solve it before he opens his mouth. Peter leaned on the railing and looked out across the city. You know I didn't want to come back. I retired for a reason. But this deal was supposed to be clean. Simple. He pitched me vision. Numbers. Promised your platform was just plug and play. It's not, I said. It's proprietary. And protected. And you own it. All of it. Peter nodded. Then smiled. Then it's time we reminded everyone in that room who they're really doing business with. He didn't say more. He didn't have to. The brunch began at 10:02 a.m. sharp. I didn't enter until 10:20, right in the middle of Logan's opening remarks. And that's why this next phase is so crucial. He was saying, pacing the stage in a fitted blazer like he was auditioning for a TED Talk. With the new DevOps framework, our platform can scale 10x in the next 12 months. Then he saw me. I walked in without breaking stride, headed straight to the back, and leaned against the wall. Just watching. Logan's voice faltered for a split second. Only someone paying very close attention would have caught it. And with our infrastructure partner, we've ensured 24/7 uptime without compromising latency. His eyes flicked to Peter, who gave nothing away. And then, to my satisfaction, Logan sweated. Not visibly. Not like a cartoon villain melting under the truth. But subtly. The way his posture stiffened. The way his hands clenched just a little too tight on the remote. The way his voice raised a half octave when he started describing the tech he didn't actually understand. I let him finish. And when the polite applause died down, Peter stood. "Before we break for coffee," he said casually, "there's someone else in the room you all need to meet." Every head turned. Logan froze. "This is Chase Everett," Peter continued. "He's the architect of the infrastructure we just heard about. And, full transparency, he's the reason I'm here today." Gasps are rare in investor rooms. But there were a few. Logan tried to recover. "Right. Yes, Chase is. He's on the technical side. Consulting, mostly. Very behind the scenes." I smiled. "Actually," I said, stepping forward, "I own the infrastructure. And I'm not consulting. I'm partnering. Through Everett Tech, which your firm failed to disclose in its investor briefings." Silence. I let it sit for just a beat longer. "Don't worry," I said, addressing the room. "We've resolved the paperwork issues. Going forward, all technical inquiries should come directly to my team. We're happy to share the roadmap and access pipeline, but only with full equity protection." Peter nodded once. "Agreed." I turned to Logan. "Nice venue, by the way. I love what you've done with the place." His face paled. "You?" "I own it," I said simply. "Through one of the holdings you tried to write out of the contract." The room shifted. Not dramatically, but perceptibly. Eyes turned. Minds recalculated. Logan tried to laugh it off. "Look, there's clearly been some confusion." "No confusion," Peter cut in. "Just correction." Logan floundered. "We should talk. Privately." "Already did," Peter said. Then added, "We're restructuring." The brunch ended shortly after that. Not abruptly. Not messily. Just quietly. Like a spell being broken. People whispered. Cards were exchanged. Hands were shaken. But no one looked at Logan the same way again. He'd brought them all here to see a king. Instead, they found the man who built the castle. And the king? He was already on the throne. But this wasn't the end. It wasn't even revenge yet. Because while Logan had just lost face, I had just found the weak link. That night, Rachel forwarded me a confidential draft email. A resignation letter. From one of Logan's closest partners. And the reason? He'd discovered something in the financials. Something illegal. Something Logan thought no one would ever find. I read the email twice, then picked up my phone, and made a call that would change everything. The call I made that night wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no threats, just a quiet, firm conversation with someone who had been watching Logan longer than I had. Her name was Michelle Torres. We'd met years ago at a fintech conference in Austin, back when I was still building prototypes in garages, and she was auditing mid-tier investment firms for a regional SEC branch. We'd kept in touch off and on since. Not close friends, but mutual respect. She liked how I played the long game. I liked how she never blinked when men twice her size tried to intimidate her in boardrooms. And now, she was senior counsel for financial investigations at the federal level. "Michelle," I said, my voice calm, "I have something for you." I didn't send everything at once. That would have been messy. Instead, I packaged it, clean, tight, undeniable. Years of emails, draft contracts, altered spreadsheets. Logan's firm had been inflating user metrics for at least 2 of their portfolio companies, padding their pitch decks with data that didn't exist. And more recently, they'd quietly funneled investor capital into a shell company tied to one of Logan's cousins in Panama. The kicker? They used my infrastructure to do it. Or rather, they tried to, because they thought I wasn't watching. But I was. I'd built in safeguards from the beginning. Mirror logs, redundant permissions. And when Logan's CTO tried to overwrite access to a particular revenue dashboard 2 weeks ago, I flagged it, tracked it, let it run just long enough to map the pattern. And then I copied everything. Michelle didn't say much when I sent the files. Just replied, "Understood. This is sufficient." You may be contacted. Stay available. 3 days later, Logan's office was raided. It didn't make national news. Not right away. But within our world, the tight, competitive circuit of VCs, founders, and legal sharks, it was a nuclear blast. People started jumping ship. 2 analysts fled within 24 hours. Another associate lawyer leaked a whistleblower letter to 3 different firms. Word spread that someone had sabotaged the deal, but no one could pin it on me. Logan didn't even have time to panic properly. He was too busy trying to lawyer up before the house of cards collapsed completely. And I kept smiling. The next part was petty, but I won't apologize for it. 2 weeks before Ivy's wedding, I got a text from Mom. "Hey honey, can you talk?" I ignored it. Then another. "Your sister's really upset. I think she wants to apologize." That one made me pause, but I still didn't reply. Instead, I sent Rachel a note. "Block off my calendar for the wedding weekend. I'll be out of the country." She replied in less than 5 minutes. "Done. I'll confirm your hotel in Geneva." Not long after, I got an email from Ivy. Not a text, not a call, an email. "Chase, I know I messed up. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about letting people speak for you, about not standing up for you when I should have. Logan's not who I thought he was, and I wish I had realized that sooner. If you're willing, I'd like you to come to the wedding. I'll seat you at my table. I'll make a toast in your honor. I miss my brother." Ivy. I didn't answer right away, not out of cruelty, just clarity, because for the first time, I could see her clearly. She wasn't the villain. Not fully. She was just a mirror, reflecting what the family always believed, that I was lesser, until I proved otherwise. That my quiet life meant I was falling behind. That success only counted if it was photogenic. And now that the glossy version of her future was falling apart, she wanted to remember who I was. I didn't need that anymore, but I did need closure. So I sent one line. "Thanks for the note. I hope the wedding goes well." And I didn't attend. I flew to Geneva, spent 3 days at a leadership summit hosted by a partner firm I had just acquired a 42% stake in. Then I hiked a mountain trail with 2 friends who didn't care what I wore or what car I drove. We talked about legacy, about what it meant to build things that lasted. Not businesses, relationships, trust, self-worth. The morning of the wedding, I got a final text from Ivy. "You really didn't come." I didn't respond, because by then, she didn't need my answer. She already had it. 3 months later, Logan was indicted. Wire fraud, securities violations, misrepresentation of investor funds. The building he leased? Evicted. The deal with Vitech? Cancelled. Peter pulled out completely and reallocated his investment into my firm. And Ivy? She filed for annulment. Didn't even make it past the honeymoon. I never gloated. Never posted a quote about karma. Never sent a told you so email. But I did one thing. I made a quiet donation to the legal clinic where Michelle got her start. In Logan's name. Tax deductible. Non-refundable. And as for my family, they started reaching out again. Polite emails. Holiday invites. The occasional, "let's catch up sometime." But I didn't go back. I didn't need to. Because revenge? It wasn't the explosion. It was the silence afterward. The power shift. The understanding that the brother they ignored had become the man they couldn't reach, even if they tried. And that, more than anything, was the moment I won. But the story didn't end there. Because one day, Ivy showed up at my office. No appointment. No warning. She came in without a word. No receptionist. No warning text. No assistant calling ahead. Just appeared. My office is on the 34th floor, and I have 3 layers of security between the elevator and my desk. But somehow, Ivy got through. Rachel later told me she looked so pale and lost that no one had the heart to stop her. She stood there for a long moment, framed in the glass doorway, looking small in a beige coat too light for the season. I was on a call with a partner from London, negotiating a merger clause. I held up one finger to signal give me a second, but Ivy didn't wait. She walked in, sat down across from me, and stared out the window as if the skyline would offer her a better explanation than I could. By the time I ended the call, she hadn't moved. Her voice was barely a whisper. I didn't know where else to go. I said nothing, just looked at her calmly. Not cruel, not cold, just tired. She swallowed hard. "It's over. Everything's over." I didn't ask what she meant. I already knew. But I let her speak, because maybe that's what she needed, someone who wouldn't interrupt her version of the fall. After the annulment, she said, Logan turned vicious. Said I embarrassed him. Said I ruined everything. But he was already spiraling. The indictment, his investors, everyone pulled out. He tried to spin it, but no one bought it. And now, she stopped, laughing bitterly. Now he's living at his cousin's house in Connecticut and blaming me for losing his empire. I didn't correct her. He never had an empire. He was borrowing mine. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. Thick, worn at the edges. My name was scribbled on the tab. I found this in one of Logan's storage boxes, she said. He was keeping files on you, trying to figure out what you were worth, who you knew, how he could get around your firm's ownership. It's obsessive. I took the folder, flipped through the first few pages. Printouts of corporate filings, blurry screenshots of my private Slack messages, even an NDA draft with forged signatures. She looked ashamed. I didn't know he was doing this. Did you want to know? I asked. Her eyes filled with tears. No. I nodded. There it was. The real answer. She could have asked questions. Could have looked deeper. Could have stopped being a passive passenger in her own story. But she didn't. Because it was easier not to. I was so proud of him, she said quietly. Everyone was. The way he carried himself. The things he said. And I thought, if I just became part of that world, I'd finally be respected. I'd finally matter. I leaned back in my chair, looking at her not as the sister who had betrayed me, but as the girl I once helped build a science fair project for because she was too nervous to present it alone. The one who used to curl up next to me during thunderstorms because she believed I could scare away lightning. You mattered before Logan, I said. You just stopped believing it. She wiped her eyes, took a shaky breath. I miss you, Chase. I didn't respond. Because sometimes silence is the most honest answer. I'm not here to ask for anything, she added quickly. I just wanted you to know I see it now. What I did. How I let them treat you. How I treated you. And I'll never forgive myself for that. I stood, walked to the window, looked down at the city pulsing below us. People scurrying to meetings. Trying to matter. Ivy, I said, you don't have to spend your life apologizing. Just don't forget again. She nodded. Slowly. Then stood. I'll go. She turned, walked to the door, then hesitated. I hope someday you'll come back. Not for them. For me. She left before I could answer. And I sat there for a long time after. The fallout came in waves. Logan's firm officially dissolved 4 months after the raid. 2 senior partners were fined and barred from managing investment funds for a decade. Logan himself pled down to avoid jail, but the plea agreement crippled him professionally. No one would touch him. Not in tech. Not in finance. Not even in the consultant circuits. His name became a cautionary tale. Ivy moved back into the city, quietly. She got a job at a nonprofit. No announcements. No social media posts. Just disappeared from the spotlight she once chased so desperately. We didn't talk often, but when we did, it was real. Honest. No more pretending. Mom and Dad. They started trying again too. Emails. Birthday cards. A holiday dinner invite I politely declined. But I didn't feel bitterness anymore. I felt distance. Not the painful kind. The healthy kind. The kind you need to breathe. The kind that reminds you that you survived something. And built something better. 6 months later, I stood on the balcony of a building I owned. The same building Logan once tried to pitch investors from. The same building where I learned just how powerful silence could be. Rachel handed me a glass of wine. Everyone's downstairs, she said. Should I tell them you're on your way? I looked down at the gala below. Tech founders, partners, clients, friends. People who saw me for who I was, not who I used to be. No, I said. Let them enjoy the party. I'll come down when I'm ready. She smiled. You always do. As she left, I turned toward the skyline. Lights blinking. Taxis humming. The city breathing. I thought of everything it took to get here. The humiliation. The betrayal. The silence. And the rise. Then I pulled my phone from my pocket. Opened my camera. Snapped a photo of the view. And typed one sentence into the caption. They laughed at the hoodie. Now I own the roof.